Hafa day. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for being here today. The Committee on Health, Land, Justice, and Culture is now called to order. Today's Tuesday, October 18, 2022. The time is 2:20 p.m. In compliance with the open government law, notices for this oversight and public hearing were published in the Guam Daily Post and the Government of Guam Public Notice Portal on Tuesday, October 11 and Friday, October 14. This hearing is being live streamed on the Guam Legislature's YouTube channel. Notice was also disseminated via email to all senators and all main media broadcasting outlets on October 11 and October 16, 2022. So for today's oversight and public hearing, I will first do an introduction of the agenda for today and a summary of the issues as I see them. We will then hear from the landowners in attendance, both in person, and there's a couple who are virtual, including one who's off island, and followed by agency personnel and then other stakeholders. Participants attending this hearing virtually will be kept on mute until called upon by the chair to provide testimony. And each member, when you are testifying, please identify yourself for the record. That's very important, and that would help us out greatly. I'm going to ask my colleagues to hold off on the questions until all those who are here to testify have testified. So if you are willing to stay behind to answer questions from the senators, I would appreciate that as well. So my apologies in advance. There are a lot of you, but we do hope to get through all of this as fast as we can. So I'd like to thank my colleagues for attending this hearing today, including the vice chair of my committee, Senator Sabina Perez, our legislative secretary, Senator Amanda Shelton, Senator Tony Ada, Senator James Moylan, our minority leader, Senator Chris Duenas, Senator Tello Taitagui, and Senator Jose Pito Terlaje. Thank you, senators, for being here. So for this oversight hearing, we've invited, in particular, in addition to the public, the following agencies and representatives to answer some questions, including Lillian Perez-Posadas, Administrator, Guam Memorial Hospital Association, Joseph M. Borja, Director, Department of Land Management, John Birch, Executive Director, Guam Ancestral Lands Commission. We've also sent invitations to members of the medical community and the one medical association and medical society, so that they could inform their members. So I'd like to thank all of you for being here today to provide testimony or comments, and we will begin. So the agenda for today is I had asked the agencies to focus on two things, and that is the proposed location of the new hospital, as well as the procurement of contracts pertaining to the proposed medical healthcare campus, and that we would hear from landowners and stakeholders as to the proposed sites and the alternatives. In advance of this hearing, we requested a copy of the site analysis conducted by Guam Memorial Hospital, the Matrix Design Group, the Department of Land Management, or any other entity, and the lease or proposed lease allowing access to Eagles Field and the surrounding areas. We've been tracking this project and had an oversight hearing last year, November 2021, with the Guam Ancestral Lands Commission and the Department of Land Management regarding GovGuam obligation to ancestral landowners when land is transferred or deemed excess. We invited landowners who had not been notified or who felt bypassed in the process of the construction of Guam's new medical campus. Many ancestral landowners and their families have come forward with claims of their exclusion and have brought their concerns to my office. We had, at that oversight hearing, asked the Department of Land Management and Ancestral Lands Commission to work together to do an overlay of the properties and the landowners so that all of them could have been notified if they were on the list of properties in the net negative list of properties that might be returned, or if they were on the list of properties that were slated to be used for the new medical campus. We are still waiting for those, some of that information. Thank you. So I want to make it very clear that in this hearing, the Guam legislature is not opposed to the construction of a new hospital. That's not what this is about. It is very evident, I think, in the actions of this legislature that all of the members are in fact in favor of the building of a new hospital, consistent with the recommendations by the Army Corps of Engineers. We've passed laws to establish a health task force that would lead the effort, and the legislature has participated in those early task force meetings. And then there was another law that changed the composition, and unfortunately, the legislature was excluded from participation by that law, but that law authorized the government to enter into contract for the design, build, finance, and lease, transfer, and long-term capital maintenance of a new hospital, Department of Public Health and Social Services, Guam Behavioral Health and Wellness Center, and the CD Lab in one campus. The law authorized up to $35 million from EITC refunds in FY22, which did not materialize, and authorizes from the general fund lease payments for up to 40 years on a lease-to-own basis. But in the recent budget, there was no appropriation made to this, as there are no particular plans in place as of yet. But what we need, I think, in this process is a transparency and additional public input. So that's my goal in calling this oversight today. According to reports found in GITA's regular Board of Directors meeting minutes, the Healthcare Task Force has continued to meet on a regular basis since its first meeting on March 24, 2021. The Guam legislature was notified and invited to this initial meeting and subsequent steering committee and subcommittee meetings in the months of April and May 2021. In fact, Senator Terlaje attended those meetings, as well as the meeting in October 2021 and November 2021. The November 2021 meeting is the last meeting the Guam legislature was notified, to my knowledge. Additionally, there are no published Healthcare Task Force meeting notes from the steering or subcommittees after October 14, 2021. However, in the GITA regular Board of Directors Real Property and Healthcare Committee reports after November 2021 up until August 2022, we were able to retrieve dates of medical campus-related meetings and very general updates on the status of actions and reports. In the latest GITA Board of Directors meetings published August 2022, the Healthcare Committee reported key meetings, with the last meeting we know of taking place on July 11, 2022 between Matrix, the Community Defense Liaison Office, and the Governor's Office regarding the reuse facilities study. Our committee looked to see if minutes or public notices for these task force meetings were published, and are not able to find those. There are several action items still pending at GITA, according to their recent board minutes, including GITA staff supporting the Governor's Office to a potential new medical service campus in terms of researching finance options and collaborating with other GovGuam agencies. RPD to draft the RFP for site preparation surveys. RPD to draft MOAs for infrastructure agencies. Ongoing collaboration between RPD and PFD for draft of PMO RFP. RPD to draft working file of project timeline. RPD to guide RIMS with the website. The legislature is pending receipt of the GITA Board of Directors meeting packets for September and October, but we have found so far no vote on the location of this new medical campus by either the task force or the GITA Board of Directors, and we have found no vote on the contractor on the contractor matrix that was hired by GITA. So in May of 2021, GITA announced that it agreed to pay its current contractor Matrix Design Group $1.48 million in federal funds to complete 9 task orders regarding the medical campus, to include updated cost estimates and examination of alternative sites and what should happen to the current hospital when a new one is built. Matrix currently holds a contract with GITA since May of 2014 to perform services requested under RFP 14-008 for professional multidiscipline consulting services for the research, planning, and implementation of economic development initiatives and opportunity. So from what I can gather, it's that May 2014 contract with Matrix under which this work is being done, this work in 2022. It's pursuant to a task force under a 2014 contract. A task order under a 2014 contract with Matrix. So under the, there are 9 task orders that Matrix has now been assigned to. I'm only going to read the last one. That is, prepare a medical healthcare campus master plan using the findings from other tasks. Recommend preferred location for the public health testing laboratory. GITA is responsible for providing alternative sites for the medical healthcare campus, including military sites that will be available for public use, as well as government of Guam sites. The consultant should evaluate any shortcomings of the preferred site, which could lead to pursuing other sites. Give at least 2 presentations to policymakers and host at least 2 forums for the medical and public health industries, due late August 2022. As you know, this has been in the news recently. There has been no presentation to the Guam legislature by this contractor as to these reports, as to the sites. As to the land, the Eagles Field, that has become the preferred alternative, it looks like, according to media releases out of the governor's office and GITA. I'm just going to talk very briefly about our understanding of this property. So on July 2020, the Secretary of the Navy responded to the governor's August 2019 letter, and the Secretary of the Navy enclosed a list of parcels to be added to the Navy's net negative inventory. The list included, for potential transfer, 50 acres of lot A7A and B, Anderson-Barragata Annex, and specified public law number 106-504 as a transfer authority. These are the properties that are adjacent to what we call Eagles Field. So these are the properties that I think most of you are in here because of. On January 15, 2021, the Secretary of the Navy wrote again to confirm that 52 additional acres from lot A7A and B, Anderson-Barragata Annex, would be added to the list of parcels eligible for return to the government of Guam as the site for the future medical complex, increasing the land for potential transfer from 50 acres, as identified in his July 2022 letter, to 102 acres. And he attached to his letter a list of all the available, or the lands that he agreed were excess and were going to be slated for return, right? So this is the process. The governor writes a letter. She requests that these lands be deemed excess. They do a table, and then the military responds, and they send back a table of which ones they agree, right, can be treated as excess. So this is what he attached to his letter, was the table. And in that table were the other lands and the 102 acres from this area. That was January 2021. On October 2021, in an interview, the governor stated to KAOM, quote, "I have not gotten any response from the original landowners, but my research says that the owners of the property have already been compensated," unquote. I called for oversight in November 2021 so that the landowners could be identified and informed, because it was clear at that point that they were not part of the process. In February 2022, the media reported that the governor, quote, was pursuing a 99-year lease from the Department of the Navy for the medical complex, unquote, and that lease negotiations between the government of Guam and Joint Region Marianas were ongoing. The governor has cited no letter from the Secretary of the Navy revoking his July 2020 letter, but cited verbal discussions with other Department of Defense personnel, and has told landowners that if the property is not used for the purpose of a medical complex, it will remain in the federal assets inventory. However, the Secretary of the Navy letter as far as I can tell from the documents that we have been shown, has not been revoked, and it still remains intact. The Guam Ancestral Lands Director has told us in previous oversight hearings and told landowners recently that land will not be returned based on a 2019 legal opinion by Attorney Brooks to GITA. I'm just finding it curious that we're relying on a 2019 legal opinion to GITA, not a legal opinion to the Guam Ancestral Lands Commission, not a legal opinion by the Attorney General's office, and that even the governor's office relies on this 2019 legal opinion to GITA. And I want to point out something that happened also recently, and that is, it's in a case. It's called Government of Guam and Guam Waterworks Authority's motions for summary judgment in the Superior Court, case number CV 1198-818. In that case, Judge Iriarte pointed to, she says, the court does not find that the evidence supports the United States' assertion that the policy of returning land back to original landowners does not constitute a public benefit use, as contemplated by the Guam Excess Lands Act. First, while the United States points to the United States Senate report on the Guam Ancestral Lands Act, which states that it does not intend public benefit use to include returning land to original landowners, the text of the Guam Ancestral Lands Act does not include language to that effect. And so then she goes on to discuss Public Law 22-145 and how it satisfies the requirement of Public Law 103-339. And so I agree with the Guam Ancestral Lands Director that there's another law in play. However, I do not agree that all of a sudden the Guam Ancestral Lands Commission has no role and that we are not going to be looking to the return of lands, and that we've given that up because the federal government's told us to give it up. I can't stress that enough, how surprising that is to me after all these years, that we are going to absolutely flip on that policy, the one that pretty much in defiance of being told over and over that you're not going to get your lands, that we are going to fight for those lands. And so I just want to hear from those at the Guam Ancestral Lands Commission, landowners, my colleagues, and all the people of Guam as to their thoughts on these turn of events. All right. I just want to point out one more thing. When the Guam Ancestral Lands Commission law was enacted, the intent of that law says, "The legislature in Guam also finds and determines that it is necessary to memorialize the true history of land takings on Guam, in spite of well-settled legal protections, as a foundation for establishing a process for the recognition of indigenous Guamanians' claims to their ancestral lands, also known as ancestral titles, so that the property rights of all citizens residing on Guam may be fully and equally protected in the future." I also want to point out the Chief Advisor on Military and Regional Affairs to the Governor indicated in an email February 2, 2021, quote, "As soon as the Admiral offered up that land as excess lands, I don't think he can backtrack on it, even if the Governor provides a different public use for the property based on what the assessments might show after a 2-year process." And I agree. And if they are slating these lands as available for 99-year leases, then they look excess to me. And that's what I want to hear from you. How does that look to you? And my colleagues. So we're going to now hear, I've asked the landowners to go first this time. And the first one we're going to hear is a virtual testimony, if they could put that one up. Margarita Tenorio Flores Cabrera Pereira.
Okay, Mom.
Okay.
You're on video, so tell them
Okay.
Half a day.
that you are.
I am Margarita Tenorio Flores Cabrera Pereira. I'm the original owner of that Eagle Field land. And I heard that you're going to build a hospital. But please, I want my land back so I can give it to my grandchildren. At least that's the only gift I can give them. So I don't know.
Situs Maasi. Thank you very much.
She's emotional.
I understand.
I'm sorry, I cannot.
It's okay. Please proceed if you'd like to say some more.
It's too hard for me to say, please.
I think we understand. I'm going to, I guess I'll is there Juan Tenorio? Mr. Tenorio, please proceed.
Do you need a written testimony?
No, sir, it doesn't have to be written, but if you could just make it loud. So raise that microphone so it's at right near your mouth. Thank you.
Okay. I'm getting emotional about this. I'm 84 years old. And I've seen the evolution since 1950. Okay.
Spencer, Mr. Tenorio, just I can't hear you unless it's
Okay.
close. Yeah, thank you.
I was born in 1938. I'm 84 years old right now. They took our land in 1955. Up to the age of 18, I've never tried running water or electricity. We catch rainwater. We cultivate that land. We grew cows, pigs, chicken, goats, ducks for our, salvation. And at the time there was a lot of coconut trees around our property. And I was 1950, I was pretty young. I saw this movement around our land. Military would come in their dozers and start tearing down coconut trees and everything that we planted. And I asked my dad, what's going on? They're going to take our land. And ever since, I feel, as an islander, I have no voice. I have no power to stop this. And anyway, through the years, we grew, we lived off that land. I got 7 more siblings with me. Okay? We grew old. We live off the land. We don't have any jobs to make money, but we survive cultivating the land, growing all these different chickens and all of that. And they took our land back. Up to Then, I had no property, nothing. And at 1962, I bought a land, 700 square meter, 1962 to today. I have 5 kids. I have 5 grands. I have 4 great-grands. Okay. In my house, there are 4 generations living in that house. Why is that? If we had our land in the beginning, I would have never gone through all of this suffering. I cannot fit all of these people in. All through the years, and by the way, I extended my house 4 different times to add bedrooms and living spaces to accommodate my family, extended family. And I'm sure I'm not the only one here. There are several of us here. And knowing now that I'm never getting that land back, it gives me the feeling of, what is there for me? What is there for my family and my siblings, their family, my cousins, my nephew, my nieces? I don't care about myself. I really don't care. I've got already a lot already prepared and reserved, 6 feet deep, and that's, I'm looking forward to. That's the only thing I'm looking for. But I want, as a landowner, Ben, my kids got no future. If you people will just go around the island and look at the boonies, there are a lot of squatters. Up in Jonah, there's squatters in them. They're living, they pitch up a tent and all that. There's no water, running water or electricity. How are they surviving? And the reason for that is not all of, because of land taken and all, but part of it was that. This island is too small. It's only 31 miles long and an average of 4 miles wide. A third is owned by the military, a third is owned by GovGuam, and a third is by the locals. Back in 1950, probably the population was maybe about 80, 90,000. What is it now? This problem is not going to resolve itself. We needed strong lawmakers, people like you. Look at this. These are your constituents. They're suffering out there. Building on, yeah, that's great, man. That's great. What about the thousands of individual local people living without power and water? And that's happening now. And you guys need to look at this. Hospital is great. And one thing I've learned through my life, there's a lot of blame to go around. You know, the blame started back in when Magellan discovered Guam. Blaming, making excuses started back then. I don't want to hear, excuse, we can't do that, we can't do this. What can we do? Can we do anything? Our lawmakers, that's why we voted for you folks. Protect us, man. We are helpless. My children, my grandkids, my great-grand, what are they going to do in the future? And I'm sure I'm not the only one here looking at this. So you folks need to look at this. Look at what's going around the island. That's it.
Si just Masi, Mr. Tenorio. I have Joseph and Goku. Okay. Okay, Francisco Flores. Francisco Flores? All right, well, I will start on the left here. I know one of you wanted to go last. Is that you too? Okay, so we'll start there. Would you like to proceed? Please state your name for the record.
Madam Speaker, Senators.
Sorry, make it louder, please. Yeah, thank you.
Madam Speaker and Senators, Hafaday. My name is Vincent Flores Cabrera. I'm the son of Margarita Tenori Flores Cabrera Pereira, who was a Price Elementary teacher, a Christian mother, a wife, who was a mother, a grandmother, and a great-grandmother. She is 93 years young, and who is the original landowner of 2517. Her father gave her this land, and she in turn would like to give it to her kids, her grandkids. I'm here to give testimony on this land that was mentioned in the media to where the proposed new hospital is to be built, Lot 257. Declaration of taking of Lot 257 was noted in Civil Case 3450, dated 1950, recorded in September 28, 1951. Yesterday, we were at a meeting at the governor's office, which caught me by surprise, because I already knew about this hearing. And GITA called me and mentioned there was a meeting, so I said, okay, I'll come down. And in that meeting, I wanted to verify and ask Mr. Borja yesterday in the meeting, how much does the military land own? And he replied, 1/3, 33.3%. Then I asked him, how much land does the government of Guam own? And he replied, 1/3. Naturally, 1/3 is privately owned. The reason why I asked this question is because of the fact that within the military and the government of Guam, you want to build a hospital, use your own land print. You have a lot of land. And what I'd like to see in the future is, if the military owns 33, the government owns 33, Governor Guam owns 33, then I'd like to see it changed. If we have this net negative property, then it should be realized that the military then goes down to 25, and then the government still stays at 33, but then the privately owned should increase. That's what all this is about. It's excess property. Excess to the military, which means they don't need it anymore, so they're giving you the opportunity to give it back. Then I asked the governor, and she was like two chairs next to me, and I said, with all due respect, Governor, is the contents of the letter of the Secretary of the Navy still valid? Dated July 2nd, 2020, from Kenneth J. Bradwood, and she replied, nothing changed. So if nothing's changed, and I have the letter in front of me, and he states, he gives a chart of all the properties, potential transfer, transfer in progress, and it all deals with anticipated date, transfer date 2022 to 2026 under U.S. Public Law 106-504. This is the property that everybody's talking about, and Madam Speaker mentioned it, Lot A7A and B, Anderson Barragata Annex. To give you a perspective of the property, my mother was just granted land back through GCC back in 2013. It is the property across GPA, the new building, Gloria Nelson building. There is a house right there, and there is an empty lot there, which has a sign, return back our land. I erected that land on my mom's property. To give you a perspective, from that telephone pole, 16 poles down, is where 2517 is. That's how long the property is. It hasn't been used. The only thing that's used was in the property that the military built was radar stations. In 2006, they dismantled one and one exists still in the back portion of the property. And that was the only reason why I asked, because if all of these properties are considered excess in this letter, then why can't we get our land back? It's excess. The Ancestral Lands Commission was built on the fact that they're supposed to fight for the landowner, not for the government. They're not supposed to fight to get land for the governor to get property back to her use. It was intended to get the land back to the original landowners so they can have something to have and build on. Farm on, like my uncle Frank, my uncle Manny and his father. They farmed the land. My uncle Frank was telling me the last night at the meeting, they had a lot of coconut trees, and they extracted and made oil. Talk about first entrepreneurship. That's what happened. And so, if this letter hasn't been changed since July 2nd of 2020, and you already have the USO Beach Park, which she stated last night in the meeting, and it further states here that it is potential transfer, which is excess. So the Secretary of the Navy reads, I am pleased to report that 13 of the parcels from your request have already been transferred or transfer in the process. In the attachments, we identified 9 additional parcels eligible for return to the government of Guam, in which if the federal government returns it to the government of Guam, then the government of Guam then transfers it over to the original landowners. That's how I thought it should be. If you look at the attachment, as I was showing you in this letter, it shows that lot, and it shows the USO. It's in the inventory, I guess. And we talk about this net negative approach, one Guam, net negative policy regarding the total number of acres of real property controlled by the Department of Defense or the Department of Defense on Guam. DoD has ongoing requirements to assess its land holding to make available the land that is excess. Excess properties are defined by Title 40, U.S.C. Code Section 102, as any property under the control of any federal agency which is not required for its needs and the discharge of its responsibilities as determined by the head of thereof. Before transfer, the Navy must determine the property is excess. I believe this document tells us that. In June 2017, Department of Navy Assistant Secretary Stephen R. Isling, letter to John McCain, Chairman, Committee of the Armed Forces, August, mentioned about all of these net negative approach. August 8th, 2019, Governor of Guam's letter to Secretary of the Navy Richard Spencer regarding additional land parcels in Guam for inclusion in the Navy's inventory of potential excess land. The January 15th, 2021 letter to the governor, Brathwaite thanks her for her letter in October 5th, 2020. Brathwaite refers to a letter from the governor. Unfortunately, I have never come across that letter. So I don't know what it says. But in this letter of January 15th, Brathwaite thanks her for the letter and for taking time to meet with him during his visit to Guam on October 18, 2020. He continues that he is committed to work with her on determining the viability of returning DoD property for a future Guam medical complex. So as I pause here, it means that before his visit on October 18th, means that the letter Brathwaite refers to is the letter where she asked for the medical complex. So all these letters that was given, all the talks, it wasn't talks to help the original landowners. It was on the backside of getting the property for the complex. when she asked for a medical complex. So during all these conversations, the 50 acres, because now she asked for a medical complex, went to 102 because it's a medical complex. Otherwise, what reason? The federal government's anxious to give away 52 more acres? The Guam Ancestral Lands Commission was set up by the Guam Public Law 2545 to pass title on federal excess land. Once returned to Governor of Guam, back to the original landowners and their heirs. Guam Public Law 25-178 sets the mission, mandates, powers, and jurisdictions of the Commission in processing claimant applications for deed of title. In the meeting last night, Blas, I forgot her name, GITA, Mendiola, I believe? Melanie. She was saying the process of getting the land back, you have to go to probate and stuff like this. But my mom is still alive. You just saw her. She don't need probate. She can just give it to her. Once the government gives it back to her, she can just give it to her kids, grandkids. So, facilitating the return of excess U.S. federal and governmental lands to their original owners. Pursuing and advocating for the return to excess federal and governmental Guam lands to their original owners. This Guam Reform Bank Act, yesterday, which we were educated by Mendiola, is a great idea for original landowners that are before us. Because like my auntie, who's been waiting for how many years to get Tiza land back, she's one of those. So the land bank now should be all those landowners that are there and that are physically there. On their list, their name is on the list. But at the present time, we have 12 families on this list. All those properties, there's 12 families. And from all of these meetings, my opinion is more of them want their property back. Not some of them, as reported. After the town hall meeting yesterday at 5 p.m. ended, not too long after, I saw the governor's Facebook post to show that she was behind the original landowner, and then she would submit the GRBA to the legislature and push it to get in November's agenda. I don't know, that sounds like passing the buck, right? If you can't do it, if you're trying to get out of the fact of the original, she actually sees the original landowners now who want to get the land back. Previously on Patty Arroyo's show, she said that there's miscommunication or there's misinformation, let's use the word misinformation out there, that all these landowners were compensated already. She said that earlier. And so now, with everything that's going on, there's 12 families here. Most of them want their land back. I don't know, I only, when they say some of them want their property back, no, I think more of them want their property back. And after that town meeting, when I saw the Facebook post, it places the ball back into the court of the speaker. Because now she's trying to push it through. And so whoever wins this election, what happens to it? In that Facebook post, she asked the DOT to return these lands to the people of Guam, and that she stands for us and says that it is now in the hands of Speaker Terlaje, and ends with God bless all ancestral landowners. Boy, would I love to have heard that when she asked GITA to get the 2019 report of all the land that we wanted back. Boy, did I want to hear that in the first letter that she wrote to the Navy, Secretary of the Navy. I would love to hear that. But only now, because there's 3 weeks before the election, she wants to put us landowners as a tool? Is that right? Is that right? So we have to go back and forth telling our story? Sorry. On August 8th, when she wrote the first letter, the governor should have been fighting for the Chamorros. which he hasn't done till now, only now, the last minute, in which the day before this public hearing. How strange is that? She stated, and I quote, "I cannot and will not sit idly while our original landowners remain unfairly compensated for the loss of their land for more generations." 3 weeks before the election. In closing, if we don't stand up, we're here because we're standing up. If we don't stand up for our land, then who will? What do we tell our children when they ask why they don't have land to build a house? And if 106-534 is in the way of returning excess land, then I plead leaders to stand up with us and fight to amend it. You know how sick and tired I am sick and tired of hearing, because of 106-504, we can't do anything with it, and if you don't give it for the hospital, they're going to take it back. I really get frustrated with that. It's like we have to bend down, right? So you are our leaders. Fight for us. Yell on the highest mountain and get 106-554 a way that we can get it back. In 2000, when this bill was into law, Robert Underwood, I don't know how hard he fought, because he could have said something back then. But now it's in law. So whatever our laws are, federal government trumps it, correct? So in closing, I say to all you leaders, all our leaders, Fanogi Tsumoru, Puritanota, Magahit, Tanu Itsumoru. Thank you.
Sizos Masi, Mr. Cabrera. I'd like to acknowledge the presence of Senator Talina Nelson and Senator Frank Blas. Thank you for joining us. Okay. I guess, sir, if you could state your name for the record.
Good afternoon, Speaker. Thank you, Speaker and Senators, for allowing us to come in and voice our opposition, basically, our family's opposition to the building, the taking of the property, and for the building of the hospital. Let me just make something clear. We're not opposed to the hospital being built. We all acknowledge that we do need a new hospital. However, we are looking for something that is just and fair, which we feel for over 50-some years, my family has been denied access to their land and the cultivation of their land for their prosperity. My mother is 84 years old, and I've been asked to also represent my auntie, her sister Vicenta. My mother is Maria Tenorio Lujan, and my aunt that I've been asked to represent is Vicenta Tenorio Gonzalo. Yes. Oh, did you have a question, Senator? Oh, okay. So, basically, from our perspective, this is a grave injustice for us that we've been denied, again, I say over 50-some years. And again, the government, albeit now the local government, wants to deny us for the remaining eternity of that property. My children and my nieces and nephew have no property other than what they're staying on right now. After that, because of the land prices and the housing prices, they won't be able to purchase property here. We're going to be like a mini Hawaii, where the locals are basically kept out of the real estate market, they can't purchase anything. So it's all the outsiders that are coming in and purchasing it. So I want to prevent that, at least, for this next generation and the generation after, and try to provide for them what belongs to their grandmother and their great-great-grandfather. We're not asking the government for anything more or less. My family just wants to have their father's land back. Now, yesterday, during the governor's meeting, the staff admitted to us during that meeting, in trying to sell us the land exchange, that we could do a land exchange, they admitted basically to us that the Chamorro Land Trust Commission has a lot of land. So logic then asks, well, if the government already has a lot of land vested in the Chamorro Land Trust Commission, then why don't you build the hospital there? Now, I submit to you that the reason why she wants Eagle Field is because she has this grand vision of including not only the hospital proper, but the mental health facility, the student health campus, and whatever else, which doesn't necessarily have to be all incorporated in the large scheme like that, where because of that, you deny us our land because of your grand plan for this elaborate hospital and system, So basically, we're at a loss at this particular point. When the governor and her staff says, "Oh, we've got a lot of land," then use that land. Why take it away from us when we barely have anything to survive for our children and grandchildren and nieces and nephews to survive on? And furthermore, this idea of, as my cousin basically said, that in early on, it was determined that those lands that impacted us could be returned as excess. But then all of a sudden, even without consultation with any of the family, they now come up and they say, "Oh no, we're going to lease that property." I'm not a smart individual, but I can tell you this, that stinks right away. Because when you say all of a sudden you're going to lease the property instead of going through with the excess requirement, then that tells me that you're trying to circumvent the law which requires excess property go back to the landowners, original landowners and their heirs. So in that sense, the governor and her staff are not our advocates. And that's what we need here. That's what we're asking of the legislators, the senators. Please be our advocate, because the future of my kids, my grandkids, my grandnephews, they all depend on us. They depend on you. We're concerned about homeless here in this island. Well, guess what? Without this land, I can tell you, I'm pretty sure some of my relatives, my nieces, nephews may be homeless. I've got cousins right now who can't own property. They can't afford it. But yet, this property can be available for them because they have a right to it, because that is their grandparents' property. So, again, I'm going to ask that, please, assist us in this endeavor to get our lands returned to us. And I say again, we're not asking more, and we're not asking less. We just want what is just right. This land is who we are. When you ask Sopiano, well, they're from, Lalo Mangilo, Lalo Vergara. We are connected to that land. My mom and my uncles and aunts they have a great deal of sentimental value placed on that land, simply because they toiled that land, they raised, their animals, and that was their subsistence way back only to be kicked out and denied for over 50 years. And now the local government, the governor wants to continue to deny us. And that is not right. Thank you.
Sidus Masi. Sir, I know you said you're the son of Maria Tenorio Lujan. Can you please state your name for the record?
Yes, my name is Frankie Tenorio Lohan.
Lujan, okay.
Thank you.
Sidus Masi. All right. Mr. Flores?
Half a day, Madam Chair. My name is Christopher Camacho Flores. My father is Henry Tenorio Flores. The property that is 2517 that they call actually the Eagles Field, that is my father's property, along with my first cousin Vincent Cabrera here. His mother and my father are brothers and sisters. My cousin down there, Frank Primu. This is the Tenorio family, Supiano. And I just want to make sure, because there's a lot of moving parts here, this is the hearing for the Land Reform Act, correct? Land Bank Reform Act, correct?
No, sir. What you're referring to is something the governor announced in her meeting yesterday with
Okay.
you, and we had not received it. We did receive it, of course, after the hearing began. So it would be put up on our website and probably referred to a committee, but no, we've not received this prior to the hearing, so this is not a hearing on that.
Okay, this hearing is for,
This hearing is for the location of the hospital that is
Okay.
right now being proposed for that area, Eagles Field, and the land that was deemed by the Secretary of the Navy as excess and okay to be returned.
okay, so I deal with facts. And
So do I, sir, yes.
okay, thank you. I'm glad that we agree on that. I can only speak for my father, okay? And when I stated earlier that there's a lot of moving parts here, we're all family, but again, we have different views in how to proceed about either do we want our land back, do we want compensation, monetary compensation, or land exchange, or remain status quo. And my understanding of the status quo right now is because as of the year 2000, when the federal law was changed, and correct me if I'm wrong, Senator, the year 2000 when the law changed that if there's excess land that's declared by the federal government and it's going to return to government of Guam, and if government Guam is not going to use it for any kind of purpose other than used by the government of Guam, that the federal government will retain that property and not give it back to the original landowners. That's the law in the year 2000. Is that a fact?
There is a law in the year 2000, not exactly as you stated, but similar. There's also a law prior to that that was similar that said it had to be for public use.
Okay.
That's correct.
So we're on the same sheet of music. So that's the issue that I have, is all of us landowners, we want our land back. But the options that we're given is that, well, it's up to the federal government. So now we have to go through Congress to try and change that law that was appropriated back in 2000. If the governor's not going to use that property for any kind of government use, that property is retained by the federal government, correct?
Sir, that there is language in a law similar to what you're saying, but not exactly as what you are saying, and it's been interpreted according to the Guam Ancestral Lands Commission by one lawyer writing an opinion to GITA.
Okay.
And I'm sure that's what the governor and others are saying to you, but I don't think that it's actually been
Okay, so
tried to be put into place by the Ancestral Lands Commission, that they've never tried to transfer land after that passage of that law. And like I told you before, when the federal government prior to that also put in their law that it had to be for a public use, and they stated different examples of public uses. And then the United States Attorney tried to argue that return to the landowners was not
An
public
option.
use. The court decided the other way. And so, we can decide that here. And the only question for me is whether we're going to fight that or we're not. But the question for today's hearing is really, the governor's proposing that instead of the land being returned, that we agree to a 99-year lease and that the hospital be situated there. And so my question to you is, what is your opinion on that?
Okay, so if what you just stated prior to what the governor's intention is for that property, if what you just stated is true and you believe that in your heart, then like my other primus here that just stated and all the families here, then you are then who we look up to make that happen, to fight that. And so with that in mind, then I would be in support of whatever the action is to return the properties back to the original landowners. But I will hold you to that, Speaker. I will hold you to that.
Sir, I am going to support that because
Okay.
that is what the people of Guam have supported for decades.
Okay.
So I am not changing my position. And
Okay, I
But
just
sir,
want to
I am
hear it
not-
from you, ma'am. Thank
but,
you.
but please be clear, and all of you, I cannot do that by myself. There's no single person on Guam who can do that by themselves. We need to work with the governor. We support her to demand return of those lands,
Okay.
not to demand anything else. And I think
So,
I'm pretty confident that my colleagues will say the same in a few minutes. So we'll see. But I'm telling you, we need everybody's support, just as we have all these years, all
Okay.
of these years,
okay,
sir.
so I'm, again, in closing, I'll keep it short. I would need all 15 senators to be behind you or beside you or in front of you, Speaker, and we'd really like to see that happen if that's the case. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And please, not behind me. We're behind you. We are with you. We are together. Yeah. Okay, so please. Whichever of you wanted to go first or second. Yes.
I said ladies first. No.
Please state your name for the record.
Good afternoon, Madam Speaker and all senators present. My name is Emmanuel Tenorio Cruz. My siblings are Dolores, Juan, Maria, Frank, Teresita, Jose, and Rosa. We are the children and heirs of Antonio Pereira Cruz, Familia Ansada. Our mother was Juana Quitua Tenorio, Familia Cipriano. My testimony regarding our land adjacent to Eaglesville, in which my father was one of the defendants named in civil action number 34-50, whereby lands owned by our father, his father, Manuel, and his siblings, Jose, Jesus, Ramon, Francisco, and Trinidad, were taken by the United States government through proceedings with eminent domain after July 21st, 1944, and before August 23rd, 1963. The issue of compensation for the United States of America's taking of our property, interest in fee, sample lot number 1013 and 2291 in the municipality of Barrigada was not adjudicated in a contested trial in the District Court of Guam. On April 1st, 1982, my siblings and I filed with the United States District Court in the territory of Guam, civil case number 820137, complainant for compensation versus United States of America. We made references of the stipulated judgment entered in civil action number 34-50, in which the U.S. was ordered to pay the following as compensation for the taking of our lot number 1013 in the municipality of Barrigada, $30 to Antonio Pereira Cruz, and for the taking of our lot number 2291 in the municipality of Barrigada $1,539.58 to Antonio Pereira Cruz for a 1.5 interest and units A and B. We were informed that other payments may have been made which have not yet been ascertained. Based on these dollar figures, my father was justly compensated. My father was not justly compensated. He was paid roughly 9 cents per square meters. Imagine 9 cents. During a discussion with my father concerning the U.S. acquisition of his property, the U.S., through its agent and employees, unfairly represented that our ancestors would lose whatever compensation was owed if they did not sign said stipulation, and the amount offered to be paid as compensation was the reasonable and fair market value of the property, and that no higher amount could be obtained under any circumstances or through further proceedings. Relying upon the U.S. representative, our father was induced to execute said documents. The child's attendance consequences of the war and foreign occupation were still fresh in minds of our father and other citizens of Guam, making them emotionally vulnerable to the request by the U.S. forces and its representatives, representing them from making it a wise business judgment. And there was a lack of civilian appraisers available. I grew up around what is now known the Eagles Field. I recall my grandfather, my father, his siblings Ramon, Francisco, Trinidad, were all farming around the Eagles Field area. They raised all sorts of crops: corn, coffee, taro, yam, sweet potatoes, breadfruit, assorted banana, papaya, guava, tangerine, orange, avocado, lemon, soursop, and coconut trees. Animals are chicken, goat, pig, carabao, horses, which was their main source of livelihood. My father's brother, Jose, had joined the military and left the island. For Jesus, he resided in Asan. At the age of 7 years old, my father told us that we had to vacate our farmland because the military is moving in. My grandfather and Auntie Da had their house trailered to Agana, where the former Rodies was situated now. Uncle Frank had his house trailered to Tamuning by the former St. Anthony's Church. Don Ramon had his house trailered to the Old Price Road. My father had our house trailered to our present location, Chada Street, which is just a few distance down the road across from Eagles Field. Vacating our farmland, and having to relocate was very emotional. It separated the family bonding between my grandfather, my father, his siblings. It was a big loss to our family's livelihood. We have no choice but to start over with what little we have. Governor Luliang Guerrero, please do not try to circumvent Public Law 25-45 by leasing it from the Navy for 99 years. This land, our land, was condemned decades ago. If you're looking for a new hospital, why not use the Oka Point in Tamuning? The land in Tamuning is available and ready for construction of a new hospital and will probably be more cost-effective. Thank you. Magahaga, por favor, ajudahan. Isainata siya ni Manaygui isinatsagan dyan minat finapus dyan hita ni Mantautotano, Itsamoro, people of the land. Por favor, magahaga ajudahan. Si Zeus mo si Tudusam Zuginin Hami dyan maniluhu, dyan palo na ipumalo na familia siya. Hola ha, mohon na unazudahan, por favor, Governor. Thank you.
Sidzos Masi, Mr. Cruz. Please state your name for the record.
Good afternoon, Madam Speaker and dignitaries here. Okay, just to mention the name individually, I'm going to be lost. Okay, but thank you very much for allowing us to be present here. My name is Maria Leon Guerrero Cruz. I am the administrator to the estate of my late grandfather, Silvestre Borja Leon Guerrero, and his late sister, Ana Borja Leon Guerrero, better known as Tanineng. For a lot of the seniors, when you mention Tanineng and you look at the property at Eagles Fields, the golf course over at Tijan, most of the properties up there, if you hear the name Tanineng, the senior citizens will understand where it's at. My grandfather, together with his siblings, si Tanineng, si Maria, si Carlos, si Esperanza, Gonzalo, and Joaquin, were ancestral landowners of lot number 5274 in the municipality of Barrigada. My testimony is regarding our ancestral lot number 5274 in the municipality of Barrigada. I believe lot 5274 is situated in the Nimitz Golf Course, close to the Eagles Field area. Actually, it's more like just one lot apart. Okay. My aunt, the late Tanineng, who was the administrator to our family estate, was one of the defendants named in civil action number 34-50, whereby lot number 5274 was taken by the United States government through proceedings in eminent domain after July 21st, 1944, and before August 23rd, 1963. The issue of compensation for the U.S. taking of lot 5274 was not adjudicated in a contested trial in the District Court of Guam. Upon review of my family's deteriorated documents, which all dated back to the 21st day of February 1952, in reference to lot 5274, it describes hectares of land and the stipulated payment that my aunt Tanineng received to be under civil number 15-47 versus 22,500 hectares of land. Stipulated payment was $36. Civil number 3-48 versus 22 hectares of land, stipulated payment was $36. Civil number 1-49 versus 22,000 hectares of land, stipulated payment was $39.60. Civil number 1-50 versus 19,381 hectares of land, stipulated payment was $72. Altogether, from the U.S. government, our family received $183. Okay. There was another deteriorated document, a letter dated 12 December 1952, that was personally delivered to Tanineng. The letter was signed by Ernest W. Lentz, Rear Admiral of the U.S. Navy, in which he referred to lot number 5274, formerly owned by our family, but acquired in its entirety in civil number 5450 as part of the Radio Barrigada Reservation. It stated on the letter that our family had recently harvested crop of corns, which was planted on the premise, and notified our family that construction in the area is in progress by representatives of the Commanding General 19 Bombardment Wing Medium, and that in the event of any future planting, the government will assume no responsibility for loss or damage to crops incidents to military construction. As you can see from this letter, it was difficult for our ancestors to accept the fact that they no longer in possession of their farmland. Another deteriorating document dated 26th day of January 1955, reference to civil number 34-50 versus 11,825,263 square meters of land. The stipulated payment that my aunt Tanineng received was $1,200. Altogether, my family received $1,383 from these 5 civil cases that went about before the military. Reference to a letter dated July 2nd, 2020, addressed to the Honorable Lourdes A. Leon Guerrero from the Secretary of the Navy, Kenneth J. Bethweth, I'm sorry, I can't pronounce that. The former Nimitz Hill Golf Course, which is where our lot number 5274 is situated, must be retained as this parcel provides critical support for aviation training and telecommunication requirement. My family now understood this is the reason why our ancestral property is not on the list to be declared excess land. We have to accept it. Our family is in support of building a new hospital, but please make it be that it is accessible to a lot of our people. What about the Tumuning Oka Point? And it will take about, according to Governor Lou Leon Guerrero's meeting yesterday, it would take about 4 years for this new hospital to be built. In the meantime, 4 years, what is going to happen to the existing Guam Memorial Hospital? Are we going to make any improvement to it? Or is the governor going to abandon it and concentrate on the proposed building of a new hospital? We are in support of the new hospital. And also, in the meeting that we had with the governor yesterday with our family here, in regards to the Ecosfield, she had mentioned that a lot of our families are now favoring monetary compensation. So family, if you look at it, the total sum that we receive, our family received on our property was only $1,383 for a big chunk of property. And if you are going to go through probate, and we still are going on probate on our deeds and property too. If you go through probate, you have to remember, you have to go through appraisal of your property, all the costs it's going to cost you, appraisal, having an attorney, survey, then also going through court. The money that you're going to spend with that, by the time you get the share that you have on the monetary compensation that maybe Lou Leon Guerrero is going to give you, it's going to probably come down to $1,300 something like our family. So she also mentioned that some of the family wanted land exchange. On the land exchange, we had encountered a land exchange on the deeds and property also ongoing, but then it was kicked out in court because it was unconstitutional. The reason being that we were ready to close a land exchange between the 2 properties in Anderson South, but then we have other landowners in Pt.1 and Sumter, Sumay, that also came in and said, if you're going to do a land exchange to the Tijan property owners, we want the same thing. So I'm wondering on this land exchange that the Governor Lou Leon Guerrero is looking into, is it going to be a constitutional transaction? Is it going to be strictly for our Eaglesfield family? Or is it going to be open up also to other families that are getting a release on their property, potential release of their property? Other family, according to Lou, other family members wanted their land returned. We want our land returned. We look at our kids, the next generation. I have 5 grandkids. I have a great-granddaughter. Where are they going to be at several years down the line? Some of them are staying with us. It's hard. They want their land back. Our family, we want our land. That's my side of the family, but then in my husband, Emmanuel, with the Eaglesfield, at least my family, my kids will have something in return if it is released that they could look into. I have to give thanks to Vince Cabrera and the rest of my family members here for their presentation. They did a very good job, and we are fighting to get back our property. We need your support. We want to, that's it. I want to say, si Diyos masi, todos hamju, jahola mon, ina juday familia, ni man gay tano gi Eagles field, jan fion na siya, si Diyos masi. Thank you very much.
Si Diyos masi. Again, I really appreciate all the testimony. And so from this panel, I had said earlier, we're going to release the panels and allow all the testimony to come through. If that's okay with the senators still? Okay, si Diyos masi. Thank you. Is there a Mr. Bernardo? Which, to be last in the hearing? Okay. Okay, so the plan now is to proceed with the agencies and then other stakeholders, including Mr. Leon Guerrero. But is there any other landowner who I've missed who signed up to testify? I know many of you are here to listen. All right, if not, then we'll proceed with the agencies. Mr. Birch, Mr. Borja, yes, and if the other employees from these agencies want to assist, please come up. Chairman Eclavea, and the CEO, Posadas, was here. Okay. Mr. Leon Guerrero? Sorry, Ken, there's a Leon Guerrero from the Department of Land Management. Sorry, is Joey? Joey, would you like to join us? Is it land management or ancestral? I'm sorry, ancestral lands, dispensa. Thank you all for waiting. This is the Vice Chairman, Laguatna. All right. I thank you. So I'd like to begin with the question of whether, regarding the contract with Matrix and the task orders, and whether there was any competitive procurement for that, to your knowledge, Administrator Posadas, CEO Posadas.
You want me to answer?
Yes, please.
Okay, all righty. Good afternoon, and thank you for this. But if I may be just honest, I don't have any information because the Matrix is not our contractor. They are contracted by GITA. So that relationship and whatever communication and whatever documents they have is with GITA, not with me, not with the hospital.
Okay. You're the head of the task force, though?
My role in this task force is just to make sure that how we envision the hospital is for the island of Guam, that the clinical and the medical services and the non-medical, the ancillary services are all in there for this hospital that we envision to then provide the services for the people of Guam. That's my role from that perspective in terms of the hospital services. I just want to make sure that we put in those entities, those elements that will make that hospital operational and serviceable for the people of Guam to meet the needs of the healthcare needs of the people of Guam.
What is your understanding of the task force's position in regards to the location of the hospital, the new hospital?
In the task force, the GITA team were the ones who were tasked to take a look at the different options, the different sites. And so that was their job, that was their responsibility, and they did. I think they took a look at about 15 possible options.
All right, yeah, so we located on the GITA website, there's a PowerPoint that was presented, I think, by the Department of Land Management, so we'll get to him soon, and that listed different sites that they looked at and some of the factors involved with those sites.
Yes, several
I'm just looking
factors.
whether, to your knowledge, there was any vote on the site, like choice of site or choice of location.
The presentation, as it was done by GITA and with the expertise of Mr. Joe Borja, the many different factors, particularly the location. I know Oka Point was mentioned by several people here, but again, where we are right now is Oka Point. There's just no space. Absolutely no space to build another hospital or even to reconstruct and build it alongside the hospital. We're already struggling with the structure itself. It's weak, it's old. Parking is an issue. So to have construction where we are right now at Oka Point is just not the option. The other option was Epal Point, that cliff line where the old hospital was. That again is not sufficient for not just the hospital, but also we wanted to incorporate public health, behavioral health, and the lab, CDC lab. It's just not enough space to do that. And the reason why we want to have that medical campus with the 3 health agencies is the continuity of care. A lot of the patients that come into the hospital are also public health patients and are also behavioral health patients. And so we want to make sure that there's that continuity, because a lot of these patients that come into the hospital who are public health clients and behavioral health, they lose track of their follow-up, because again, they have to go here, they have to go there. And that was really the goal of why we want to have that medical campus in one entity, in one area, for the continuity of care.
All right, so you're saying that as the chair of the task force, you're not aware of any vote that was taken as to the location, but that is your preference for the location?
We narrowed it down after a presentation by GITA and by Joe. We narrowed it down to where really would be the best option.
You narrowed it down by vote?
Not so much by vote, but just by, the factors, as far as like I mentioned, the area, the acreage, how we can then accommodate all the 3 entities, agencies.
Did the task force vet the hiring of Matrix?
No, the hiring of Matrix is again separate. It's by GITA. And Matrix was recognized by the military in terms of they were the ones awarded for any grants that come through the federal government. And so that Matrix was the consultant that GITA works with for any of those. And this grant came from the Office of Economic Adjustment. That's the grant that came, and it was awarded to the governor. Then the governor designated GITA to handle that grant, and then GITA subcontracted it with Matrix.
All right, and you had worked with the Army Corps of Engineers, and were you familiar with their quote as to how much it would take?
A new hospital? Correct.
No, their quote as to how much for them to be the consultant on the charrette and all of that for the new hospital.
When we met with Lieutenant Colonel Eric, he gave us an estimate. I think it was something like 1.7 million for a charrette.
The charrette,
That
right?
will take more than a year to do.
That's correct. That's the whole plan.
Charrette is what they
Yes.
call it.
Yeah, and the in the June 2021 GITA board meeting, they reported that the Guam Memorial Hospital industry survey was disseminated to the medical community by Matrix. Are you aware of the status of that survey?
We submitted a survey from ourselves within the medical community. We sent it out electronically.
You, the task force, or you, GMH?
GMH, our communications director at that time, we sent it out just to get their input, what they would like to see in this hospital and their thoughts as far as, the options of the sites.
All right.
Primarily, what they would like to see in a hospital if we were to build this new hospital.
Okay, so we looked on the websites. We can't find any results of that survey. So what is the status? It's complete?
Status of the survey, and I can't remember the total number. We didn't get much of a response
Okay.
from the medical community. But the kinds of services that they would like to see, with the diagnostic imaging, medical surgical floor, operating rooms. I can't remember exactly what other MRI. They wanted to make sure that we have an MRI in that hospital. So
Was there
again,
any
primarily
question?
clinical stuff.
Thank you. Was there any question on the survey regarding the location? Because we've heard medical professionals talking about the site or criticizing the site. But were they surveyed in that survey regarding the site selection?
I honestly cannot remember exactly if we did, but I know that some of the doctors have mentioned and have expressed their concerns that they don't want it in Manila.
They don't
Some
want.
do, some do. They don't want it to be away from Tamuni because they have established their clinics there. So they'd rather have it within Tamuni area.
All right. Okay. I'm going to. I know if the Department of Land Management could tell us very quickly the sites that you presented to the task force, and is it your understanding that there is a final selection of a site? And was there a vote, to your knowledge? You're also a member of the task force?
To my knowledge, I don't remember a vote. And what was your other question, Speaker?
If you could just give, I know I can provide these documents to them, but there was a list of sites that you analyzed
Oh,
for
yes,
the task force, and just very quickly name those sites. And so is it your understanding that there is a preferred site that's been selected?
Yes, but can I go through my presentation and then we can go and ask questions? I'd be more than happy to stay as long as you require.
Your presentation?
Yeah.
Yeah, on these questions?
Yes,
Please?
let me go ahead and start. My name is Joseph Borja. I'm the Director of Land Management, and a little bit of disclosure and transparency. My father's Carlos Materni Borja. My mother's Juana Martinez Borja. My grandmother is Juana Elgie Martinez, and my grandfather is Juan Pangilinan Martinez. And I mention my background in the family because in 1945, during the war, the Americans and the Japanese were trespassing on our property. In 1947, the military, United States, leased our family property for 3 to 4 years. And in 1950, they condemned all of our properties. In 1950, for NAS Aganian Tijan, our entire property was condemned, 4 lots, and subsequently, recently has been returned and to all our 172 owners of that acre and a half. In 1950, a portion of our property was condemned for Route 8, so people in Agania can get to Mangilao and get to Dededo through Barrigada. A portion of Route 8 belongs to us. In 1950, our entire property was condemned for Barrigada Village, so that the now residents of Barrigada could have homes and lots to live. And I believe one senator in the panel has also had their family property taken away from that. Barrigada Village was created by the military. So was Agat, so was Sinahadna, so was Gani Heights, so was Talafofu, so was Dededo, and so was Asan. Those were all original landowners that the military condemned and provided house lots to Chamorros. In 1950 also, my father's property, my grandfather's property, was condemned for O'Brien Drive, which probably a lot of the People pass by there. And later on, again, the government condemned our family property in Barrigada for what is now Carbolito Elementary School, so that the residents of Barrigada and their children could have a school nearby for them. So that's basically a disclosure. There are the DLM process for vetting these properties, these sites. Number one was to determine parameters, location. The governor wanted a central location of the property for the new hospital, as Dededo, or the northern area, already has 2 hospitals, GRMC and the existing Guam Memorial Hospital. Another parameter was size, so that we could expand. Another parameter was the horizontal and vertical space. Are you able to build up, or are you also able to build sideways? And what the intended use is for. We looked at the size, looking at the existing acreage of GMH, public health, and hopefully putting in a medical commercial plaza into the area. What we did is we found the acreage, that will be the ×1, and expansion acreage of ×4. That's where the 102 acres came out. That's why it was 102 acres. The next step in our process was to see what is already reserved in the Gulf Guam Inventory of Reserved Lands, which is Public Law 2218, as I think Mr. Frank Lujan mentioned. Let's see what Gulf Guam has, or what did Gulf Guam reserve in Public Law 2218 for actually a medical complex, not just a hospital. Guam Memorial Hospital, acute care hospital. I'm reading this from the Section 2B Exhibit to Public Law 2218. Guam Memorial Hospital Authority, acute care hospital, Sinahanya, lot 3470. The entire lot is 117.94 acres. The committee at that time reserved 35 acres for an acute care facility. The government, legislature, also reserved for Guam Memorial Hospital a long-term care facility down in Inalahan, lot 380, 138 acres, and 5 was reserved for a long-term care facility. Now, I'm not too sure on the terms here, but acute care, I guess, is short-term care, maybe a clinic type, and a long-term care facility is kind of like a hospital where people get admitted.
Like SNF.
So the legislature,
Mr. Borja, can I
Yes.
just confirm? You've reported this to the task force, is that correct? All
Yes.
of these assessments of
yes.
the land?
yes.
Yes, so those reports are available on the website, and I think we've talked about this in our prior
No,
oversight hearings
yeah.
as well.
So let me
So
go
I'd just
ahead
like
and
if you could
say,
just remind the senators of the names of the properties or the locations of the properties that were assessed, and if they want all the details of the assessments, those are available on the website.
Yeah, we assessed this. So Inarahan was identified in Public Law 2218 as a proposed long-term care facility. Also, Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse for an adult residential treatment facility in Chalampago, lot 3470 again, 5 acres was reserved for that. A children's residential treatment facility for public health, Department of Mental Health, was also in Chalampago in lot 3470, 10 acres of that 117-acre lot. Also for Department of Mental Health, a crisis center in Chalampago in the same lot, 3470, 2 acres for that. And this is one lot, other than that Inalahan lot, for the actual hospital, for a medical complex, because Department of Public Health was also reserved land in the same lot for a homeless shelter, lot 3470 again. Now, in one case it says Sinahanya, and another case it says Chalampago. It's actually Chalampago, on Santa Cruz Drive. You access this property by a road called Chalanokso, kind of like the road to the hill. Also for public health was reserved a children's foster home, again in Chalampago, lot 3470, 2 acres for that. Also for public health, a public health facility, again in Chalampago, lot 3470, 4 acres. That's the extent of the Chalampago/Sinahanya lot 3470. We did take a look at this property. We actually walked the property, lot 3470.
Okay.
Went into the property and looked at it. And of course, even from our records at land management and aerial photographs, the property has creeks running through it. The topography is hilly and unsuitable for these medical facilities. So much so that years ago, when public health had money to build a lab, the legislature enacted a bill to exchange Chamorro Land Trust property in Dedido for this property in Sinahanya, in Chalampago, lot 3470, so that they could build a lab. If some of you senators have gone in that area, Santa Cruz Drive, it's basically a narrow 2-lane road, sometimes less than 2-lane, and it is a problem going through those residential areas.
Okay. Mr. Borja?
Yeah.
Yeah, so on the GITA's website, there's a list of site assessment for new hospital facility. And they list option A, B, C, D, E, and then alternate sites. You want me to read those?
Well, I'd like to finish my presentation.
Right, well, I'm asking...
Otherwise, I mean, if it's on the website and you think that's adequate,
Well, I just like them, to get an idea of the sites that you assessed.
Yes.
We don't need to hear the entire assessment right now. Just the site, so
I would
I was
defer,
hoping you would read the list that was actually discussed at the
Madam
task
Speaker,
force.
my apologies for interrupting, but this is the process that we took to these properties. We didn't just say, okay, let's go Eagles Field. There was a process vetting all these properties that we already had, and it's not just those properties. We looked at what's already with Gov Guam under Public Law 2218, but we also looked at what they had, and this included land that maybe land management had, the other land agencies, land grant institutions such as GCC and the UOG, and land owning entities, including boards and commission, that includes Chamorro Land Trust and the Guam Ancestral Lands Commission. By the way, the inventory in Chamorro Land Trust
Mr.
properties
Mr.
are
Borja,
all original
I'm not trying to be
owner.
rude, sir, but if we could just get to exactly what we want to talk about today, and that is the site assessment that you did. All I wanted was you to report on that. Even the lots you're listed are not listed on that site assessment that's been posted by GITA. Those are very preliminary, I'm sure. The option A is Eagles Field, Manilao site. Option B, current site. Option C, Oka Point. Option D, South Benegazan site. Option E, alternate location, site to be decided. And then there's a list of alternate sites. And they list size and jurisdiction, meaning ancestral lands, Navy, GMH, or CLTC, whose land it is. And in those, they listed Attica and parentheses Crown, meaning Crown lands, Anderson South, Cross Island Road, Eagles Field, existing GMH, Finagazan, Old FAA, Lot 198, Jotnya, Lot 508, Maritzo, Lot 7163, R1 Jigo, Oka Point, Radio Barragata, South Finagazan, Track 10123 Jigo, Two Lovers Point, UOG Conservation. So,
Yes, that's a complete list, Senator.
yes, and so these are the ones that were discussed by the task force. So my question to you is, from this part that's been posted up at GITA, it says the consultant is expected to, these were provided by you, right? Is that correct, Mr. Borja?
Correct.
To the task force. You were the one who did this
Yes,
site
correct.
analysis.
Correct.
Thank you for that work. And it says here, the consultant is expected to complete the medical campus master plan, including analysis of sites within 15 months from notice to proceed. But, yeah, so I just want to point out, for all of those who are involved or questioning, yeah, they have the entire site assessment done by Mr. Borja, the director of the land management, already shows sites, location, size, development constraints, cost for off-site utilities, impact on surrounding property values, short-term construction impacts, opportunities, gains or losses, and other information. And so, is there any update on this analysis to your knowledge that you provided?
No, other than to include the potential site for the first building to be constructed in there, which is the lab. The original plan was to build the lab on the southwest corner. We found that to be a low area. And now the site for the lab is in the southeast corner of the big parcel. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Did you use any contracts to complete this work that you did for the task force?
No, other than the license to enter the property to conduct the survey. That would be the only contract that we have, and that's a contract with the Navy.
So the work, all of this assessment work was done in-house by the Department of Land Management at your cost?
That's correct, and with the GITA's assistance on it, yes.
Okay. And then it says it's pending a further site assessment by Matrix. All right. I'm going to get to the ancestral lands briefly, and then I know the senators are anxious to ask questions themselves. So, Mr. Birch, yes. So, I know we talked about this at a prior oversight hearing, and so for you, I just wanted to ask, what is the Ancestral Lands Commission role in the site determination for this hospital? And did you have any alternative proposals?
Madam Chair, my apologies for interrupting.
Oh, no, please.
I just want to do a little clarification.
Sure.
At the beginning of the hearing, you said that you requested information from land management, which is still pending. I just got this message from my staff that those items were delivered. This is your office responding. This is to confirm receipt of the USB you dropped off to our office containing DLM FOIA 2022-01 and 2022-02 documents. Files have been transferred and your USB is ready for pickup at any time. We sent that information two ways. We sent it as an email attachment, but we were concerned that the file was too large and may not have gotten transferred completely. So our office decided to physically drop off a USB with the same documents on it. And that was in November of 2021.
Yes, so I agree. After the hearing, we received many documents from land management showing maps, showing lots, showing separate documents showing landowners, and we had asked for these to be transposed on top of each other so that all the landowners would be very clear which lots were theirs, and whether that was included in the 100 acres that was being proposed at that time. That's, I think, that those transposition.
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Director. Ancestral lands, yeah. So what is the role of the Ancestral Lands Commission in the site selection, and have you executed any contracts in regards to this hospital site selection, and have you proposed any alternatives to the site selection?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. For full disclosure and also clarity, like Mr. Bora, I want everyone here to understand that I too have a vested interest in this thing being resolved once and for all. On my mother's side, my grandparents, Isabella Valenzuela Cruz and Juan Guerrero Cruz, they each own, and it was recently returned to GovGuam, part of Route 4, extends from Cochiles and Chalampago just past the Barrett Plumbing area, including all of that. So yes, we do have a vested interest. And on my wife's side, her father, Jesus Suico, he owns property in Mongmong. and through that property still runs the 115 kV power lines that GPA uses that cuts through the land. And on his deathbed back in 1986, he asked me to help resolve that issue, and if we could get somehow help get their land returned to their family and remove all the federal easements. My wife became the administratrix, and I helped do all the research. And by 1993, they were able to get title to all their property except for that part where GPA has their power lines today. So that was way before ancestral land. So do I have experience in having property returned? Yes, I work directly with the U.S. military and the Army Corps of Engineers and others here in Guam and in Hawaii. So this is nothing new to me. I've done this before, and I want you to know that my wife's family was very happy to get as much as they could so that they could settle on their property. So yes, I have a vested interest, and I have experience in getting this thing done. So I know that everyone here that we met earlier, I see what they're going through. My family's gone through that, my wife's family's gone through that, and at least for my wife's side, they got most of their property back. So I thank all of you for inviting me here, and for those of you who are here, because this is a very sensitive issue for all the families, and many of us have gone through this. So for all the senators here, thank you for being here and staying with us to listen, because what my job is to try to return the property as much as we can within the law, and if not, then find some form of compensation. So for my grandparents' side, there is no compensation that we've received for that property for Route 4 through Chalampago. Or my wife's side, there is no compensation for that GPA power line that we know would never be returned. So yes, I do have a vested interest in that. And in here, I know you're asking, have we been involved? And I like to read my testimony, my written testimony that I presented, because it explains the issues that we're trying to resolve as much as possible. And if I may, the Guam Ancestral Lands Commission is not a part of the task force involved in the planning of the proposed Guam Medical Health Campus.
Did you suggest any parcels to be used?
We've been asked, and yes, we did give, but there's part of 25 or so options available, but we had no involvement in the selection. So GLC, the Ancestral Lands Commission involvement with the medical campus, has been limited to identifying the original landowners and heirs of the site selected for the medical campus and sharing with them our assessment of the substantial impact that U.S. Public Law 106-504 has on curtailing the prior practice that was allowed under U.S. Public Law 103-339 and also the BRAC law of returning excess federal lands to the original landowners and the intent to build the medical campus on their ancestral lands. So we've held several meetings. The first one on March 22, 2022. Many of the families are here, and I know that all I'm doing is giving them the truth, and that's all. Sometimes the truth does hurt, and this part was very hard to give them because it affects my family and my wife's family too. So it's very hard. So what we're trying to do is find a solution, and we're doing our best to do it. And I'm glad that I have a very good staff and also board at the Ancestral Lands Commission that has been there to advise me and try to get us through this problem. So the families of the original landowners of Lot A7, A and B, Anderson-Barragata Annex, also known as the Eagles Field area, met with the governor and the lieutenant governor to discuss the government of Guam's potential lease of their ancestral lands from the federal government. At this meeting, the following twice weekly meetings throughout the next month, from March all the way up to about early May, several attendees expressed their concern that their lands would never be returned.
Are these meetings with you? Because I need
Yes.
you to testify
I'm
about
there,
your role.
and I
I'm
attended
asking
each
you
and
your
every one of them.
role. Yes.
My role?
Yes, your role.
My role is, yes, to conduct the meetings. And
You
together
did.
with GITA, yes.
Ancestral Lands Commission.
Ancestral Lands and with GITA together. Okay, so, and this basically, several attendants expressed their concern that their lands would never be returned because they were occupied by the United States military. Some shared that their families may have received some compensation for their land from the United States federal government, but that these transactions were unfair and made under duress, that the compensation was inadequate compared to the value of their land. Some shared that they did not want monetary compensation, that they wanted their land to be returned so they could pass it on to their children. And yet others supported building the medical campus on their ancestral land in exchange for fair compensation. But no matter the circumstances of each family, they all agreed that we need a new hospital and that the ultimate issue was one of fairness to their ancestors and to their families. All the families wanted their ancestral lands to be declared excess by the federal government, which they believe would start the process established for returning these partials to the original landowners following the enactment of the Guam Excess Lands Act, and that is U.S. Public Law 103-339, and the Guam Public Laws 22-145 and 23-141. The Guam Excess Lands Act specifically identified parcels deemed excess by the United States federal government to be transferred to the government of Guam with restrictive covenants that required the properties to be used for public benefit. The act also required that the government of Guam to prepare a land use plan for the properties as a condition for the release. In response, the Guam legislature created a land use plan that defined the return of land to original landowners as an economic benefit.
Yeah, Mr. Birch, back to your
Yes.
role,
Well,
please.
yes, I'm getting to that. I'm going to.
If you could please get to that right
I
now.
will. Yes, Madam Speaker. That met the requirements of public benefit use with the passage of Public Laws 22-145.
What did you tell the landowners?
Okay. Well, this
In
is
these
what I'm
meetings?
getting to that, the next paragraph. These landowners were not aware that the United States Congress provided a new process, this is what I told them, for the return of federal excess lands in U.S. Public Law 106-504. We're still processing lands that are returned under 103-336, and those, in fact, we're now set up for a deed signing for property to be returned to the Limtialco family or estate in Asan. That's about 4.97 acres. So this was enacted in the year 2000, over 2 decades ago, and they were unaware of this U.S. law. I shared the impact of U.S. Public Law 106-504 had in curtailing the prior practice of returning federal excess lands to original landowners. More specifically, subsection B, and I included in my testimony a copy of the law, conditions of transfers, which states any transfer of excess real property to the government of Guam may be only for public purpose and shall be without further consideration. And 2D, the property is used only for a public purpose and cannot be converted to any other use. And lastly, subsection C5, the term public purpose means those public benefit purposes for which the United States may dispose of property pursuant to Section 203 of the Property Act as implemented by the Federal Property Management Regulations 41 CFR 101-47, or the specific public benefit uses set forth in Section 3C of the Guam Excess Lands Act, except that such definition shall not include the transfer of land to any individual or entity for private use other than on a non-discriminatory basis. And I also got information from a report given by Attorney Terrence Brooks, and I had this confirmed by the Guam Ancestral Lands Commission, and he admitted that we were on the right track, Assistant Attorney General Nicholas Tuff, and also by the Governor's legal counsel, Jeffrey Moots. So it's 3 attorneys who told me that this assessment is true and correct. A legal memorandum from the Guam Economic Development Authority's
Okay,
independent
so
legal
Mr.
counsel.
Birch.
This is what you asked me,
Yes,
what I
so-
informed them, and this
yeah.
is exactly what I told them.
Let's
I'm
just
trying
talk
to
about
testify
that.
to that fact that they were informed. It wasn't one lawyer.
You were
and
informed,
106 and-
you, the chairperson,
and-
the
yes.
director of the Ancestral Lands Commission, had private meetings with landowners separately
had
and
several
informed
meetings.
them in separate occasions
Over-
that you were not going to work to get their
No,
get their
that's
land
not the
back
truth.
because
We
you
are
had received
working
a
to
legal
get their land
opinion not
back.
to
If
return the
not-
land. Mr. Birch, is that correct?
If we can't give
Is that
them
what you
their
told
land
the
back,
landowners,
no.
Mr. Birch?
Can I please clarify? Can I finish
Yes.
my testimony,
No,
please?
please clarify.
You
No.
asked me to be here. I'm here to give
I'm asking you to be here.
I am trying
to talk
do
about
that,
what you
Madam
told
Speaker.
these landowners, what
Madam
your
Speaker,
role
I'm
is on the
trying to do
task
that.
force.
Every time you've asked me for any information from Ancestral Lands, I've always been upfront and gave you
Yes.
everything I can, as quick as
I'm
I can get it
asking
to
you to do the same
and
today,
I'm trying to do
please.
that right now, but I wanted to make it clear, it's not from one attorney, and I didn't say we're not going to give them their land back. We're going to do the best that we can, but I'm a law-abiding citizen. I will follow the law. I asked you to help find me a loophole. Find a way, pass a law so we can return these properties.
No,
But
you
didn't
never
give
told me you
one.
were
I
not going
asked
to
you.
return
I never
lands,
said
Mr.
that.
Birch. You have
I
never
said 106.
testified to that in
My
this place.
assessment of 106
That's-
says, and if you read it, I gave you each a copy of it, that the law prohibits that.
Okay.
It pretty much nullifies what was allowed
So
in
we have-
103 and the local law.
Okay, and
That's
I'm-
what I'm trying to explain. If you
I
allow me to
appreciate,
complete.
yes, that you-
May I complete my,
We appreciate that
I
you
mean,
have
may I
interpreted
complete-
the law and that you have
I had
reported that
also-
to the landowners
and
in
we
separate
also
meetings.
had an assessment done by other attorneys. I
Okay.
don't have it in writing.
Well, that's not in here, yes.
I know it's not in writing, but I'm telling you that it's there, and you could always bring them down and question them.
Okay.
We did not have a part in the task force.
All
My
right.
job is to do research and to give the truth. The truth sometimes hurts. And I don't like to hurt people's feelings by telling them the truth, but sometimes we have to so we know where we're at and find out what we have to do to resolve this issue. And what we can do, if we can't return the property, at least give them alternatives. Chamorro Land Trust has alternatives. We attempted this way back with
Did
the
you
Pt.1
propose
Trust.
alternatives to the task force?
Well, right now, can I finish and I'll tell you
Did you
how that
propose
occurred?
alternatives to the task
No, I'm
force?
not
Is
part of
my
the task
question
force.
since you
I'm not
you
a part of
started.
the task force. I'm not involved with the task force.
Did you propose alternatives, yes or no? Alternatives
What
for
we've
other
done,
land that
what
they
we
could
have,
use?
and what you received today is what we call the Land Bank Reform Act of 2022. In there
That
is
does
the
not give us
alternative.
any
That- I
property
know,
for the
in
hospital.
there- No, but it gives us a way to get property to these people
Okay.
through other forms of land exchange, of monetary compensation, to
All
bring
right.
in new revenue sources of revenue.
Mr.
in there. You
Birch,
got it. That's what I've
that's
been
not got to
working
do
on.
with the
But
hospital.
that does have, because if their land can't be returned to them, at least give them a chance so that we can give them land exchange somewhere else, something of equal value, equal privilege, so that they're not left out in the cold. They want to provide something for their aunts, for their children and their grandchildren. This is the way. Please read that
I will
bill
read
was
that
submitted.
law, but that bill
It's a
does
bill.
not have to do
No,
with
but it
the
provides the
hospital
alternative. You're asking me about
location.
alternatives. That does provide the alternative.
Is there any other ancestral land, crown land,
We have-
or any other land
We have
that the Ancestral Lands
1,400
Commission has
acres,
proposed?
But we have
Pardon?
1,400 acres in the land bank inventory. And that could be leased out, or that could be used for other purposes. That was also made available, but it
Did you
wasn't
propose
selected.
that to the task force?
Mr. Bora is aware of it because he used to run Ancestral Lands in the past. So he's aware of it, and yes, they are aware of it. I'm aware that they're aware of that. But the thing is that belongs to the land bank. We can't raid the land bank because that's locked for the beneficiaries of the land bank. So while that may have been considered unconstitutional under the Pt.1 Land Act thing, well, getting other properties outside of the land bank, like from Chamorro Land Trust, is not unconstitutional. It is a way. So my job was to find a solution, to find other ways to provide property to these people. If they want land for land, we'll give them land for land. There is a way, but we need your help. That has to be legislated. We can't do it on our own, and I can't do it. Those properties, many of them fall under the Chamorro Land Trust. To transfer that, it needs legislation. I can't just go in and tell the governor to unilaterally transfer
I surely
those
hope
properties.
not that
I
no one
can't.
in here can transfer land from the Chamorro Land Trust to
can
some
only
other
be
people.
From the
Mr. Birch,
legislature.
okay, let's
So
just.
you asked me, I'm asking,
yes.
can I finish reading? Please.
If you're just going to give us an assessment of what you think the law is, Mr. Birch, no.
That's-
I prefer
but
to
that's
you
what
tell
we've been
us
working on.
exactly what you told the landowners,
This is
exactly
what I
what you
told them.
told
I'm
the
reading
task
to-
force. And if we've heard that
I-
already, then I'll leave the questions to the
I
senators.
don't meet with the task force.
Pardon? Okay.
I
So
told
there
you
was
I'm not
no
a
other
part of the task
proposal
force.
made by the Ancestral Lands Commission to the task force for use of land. There was nothing said
do
from the
research.
Ancestral Lands Commission to the task force.
I do
Don't use this
research,
land. This should
and
be
I
returned.
provide the
Nothing.
research to whoever asks of it, whether it be
Yes.
the governor, whether it be any of the special assistants, or any attorney. If they ask me to do research, just like you, Madam Speaker, if you ask me to provide you with research, I do it, and I get it to you as quick as possible. I
Yes.
do that for anyone that asks. We're a small agency, but we do the best we can if any senator asking us anything.
So is it your opinion that all the ancestral landowners whose land might be used for this hospital, the 100 acres, have been informed? Did you inform them? And did you tell them
Inform them of?
that the Navy, Secretary of the Navy had written a letter saying that this is excess lands and therefore possibly could be returned to the government
It's
of
a
Guam? Did you tell them
potential
that?
return. I
Yes,
can't
did you tell them
say-
those things?
And all I know about stuff like that is
Did
what
you know,
we read in
Mr.
the
Birch,
paper.
please,
I'm telling you the truth now.
Wait, I
You're
can't
not
hear
allowing
you.
me to finish reading my statement.
Because I'm asking you.
You don't want to
this
hear
is
it.
an oversight
That's
hearing,
why.
Mr. Birch.
You don't want to hear what I have to say, but
Mr.
please
Birch,
read that bill. All
I
of you.
have given
We will
all of
work.
your testimony to
I
all
will
of the
work with each
senators.
one of you.
Mr. Birch, okay.
We need to resolve this issue, and that's what you're asking me. What have I done? And that's what I have done.
Okay, so Mr. Birch,
Yes.
you're trying to tell me, you've given us your testimony of how you interpret the law, that you've told us you met with the landowners, separate meetings, and you've told them that your interpretation is they can't get their land back. Now you're telling me you've had no
excuse me,
meetings with the
Madam
task
Speaker.
force. You've proposed no other properties that they should use for
Madam
their
Speaker.
And one more thing is you're telling me now that all your work I should pay attention to is this new bill, Ancestral Land Bank, because
Madam
this
Speaker,
doesn't address the hospital.
I didn't say we're not returning any land. We do have some properties being returned under U.S. Public Law 103,
Okay.
339.
Yes.
Those are being returned should we find the
Okay.
ostensible landowners. We're doing our best for that. I've said we are returning one right now. We've passed that process. We're just waiting for the deed signing. That's all that's left on that. So are we returning property? The answer is yes, we are.
Okay.
Yes, that's under 103, 339. Now, Eagles Field is under 106,
Mm-hmm.
504. It's a different process. That's what I'm
Yes.
trying to explain to you. The
I
process is
understand.
different. I'm asking you if any of you in your positions as lawmakers can provide me with a loophole, then yes, we will attempt to do it. But to violate the law is another thing. I don't violate the law for anybody.
Well,
And I'm telling the truth, and the truth hurts. So you show me where the loophole is,
all I know,
and I will
Mr.
follow
Birch,
through.
is that
Show
the
me.
United States Attorney proposed in that last lawsuit that
I'm not-
we had violated the law by returning lands to the ancestral landowners, and the court said, no, we had not. So
That
that's
was
all.
prior-
And that we created this law in the face of the United States government not wanting to return land to the ancestral landowners. So
Show
I
me
also
that.
know that. So
Show me that.
I don't
and
want to argue. I'm just,
I just
trying
need to
to
be
get to the
shown it.
facts of what was told to the task
I'm
force
tell-
as to available lands, whether there were
I'm
any
telling you what I-
alternatives proposed, and I'm trying to get to what was told to the landowners in these meetings.
I'm
and-
telling you what I told them, but you won't let me finish. So, Madam
No,
Speaker,
I think
mean,
We heard what you said
ask
to
me,
them.
and I'll just tell you, I'm not a part of the task force.
Okay.
I have nothing. I have no knowledge of any
All right, thank
procurement.
you.
I have no knowledge of the different things that you asked. My involvement was
Yes.
basically research,
Okay.
and I have
The
a vested
landowners.
interest in
So
getting
have
this
they all
thing
been
done.
notified, please? Have they all been notified?
As many as we could contact.
So is that all?
Some have been deceased, and some we could not contact.
Okay.
We met with about 50 or so at about 21 meetings or so.
Did you inform them of the Secretary of the Navy's letter?
We provided whatever they asked. I don't remember which
If they-
documents, but we did.
Only if they asked. Okay.
And
All right. I'm going to ask the senators to ask some questions now. Senator Paris, you may begin.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So yeah, I mean, I think it behooves us as a government to right the wrongs of the past. In light, even in the face of these federal laws that are passed without our consent. And, as ancestral lands, that was my perception, that this was the duty of ancestral lands, is to help right these wrongs. And we're hearing today from the testimony of many of the landowners how they were treated. Their land was taken without their consent, unjustly compensated. And I think this is a story that we all Chamorros share, and I think it's within our responsibility and duty to right this wrong. So we need to listen to the voices of our people that have testified today and find the right solution and not an intermediate solution or so-called solution. And, in looking at the Enabling Act for the ancestral lands, a part of it is to remedy. This is the part of the duty of ancestral lands, is to investigate, record, file, report, respond to requests for claimants for remedy. And I think we really need to live up to this word of what does it mean to remedy? The colonizers have taken our land. Let us not repeat the actions of our colonizer. So I do want to support those that have come to testify here today. I mean, they're this close to getting their land back. They've lived almost their full lives to see their land. I only wish that my grandfather was able to experience this before he passed. And my mom, too. This is something that I would like to see her see in her lifetime. And we have a chance to make things right in their lifetime. And I want to encourage everyone here today to work towards that goal. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Sorry, Mr. Borja, Director Borja, did you contract for the surveying of the property?
No.
Did you contract for any studies on the property when you got the license?
No.
To enter it? None. All right, thank you. Senator Nelson.
Okay. This 106-504, Mr. Birch. Has there been any properties returned under that statute since this law was enacted? 106-504? Can you turn on your mic, please?
Sorry. I believe that there's some that may be in the process of being returned right off, like Hoover's Park, which is the old USO. I believe that's under 106-504. And because of that, I don't think that property is, well, Ancestral Lands doesn't receive any title unless it's turned to us after other government agencies decide that they don't need it. But I believe that because there are hundreds of owners, so that 5 acres or so down there, or maybe thousands of owners, that may not be returned to the original landowners. But it is under 106-504, and there is going to be a problem returning that.
Okay.
One, because it will be in violation, the way I assessed it and the attorneys I talked to, of U.S. Public Law 106-504, and the other one is because of the amount of heirs to the property. They may get like 1 meter of property each to them, should they get that return. So I believe it may be turned over to that, and I'm not sure.
Forgive me for interrupting.
Maybe Mr. Borja may know more about that, but that's one that sticks out.
Okay.
There's other properties,
right,
might
I'm
be
gonna ask Mr.
Tengiz Beach
Borja.
Park, but
Mr.
then
Birch, I'm
again,
gonna
there's
ask
no
Mr.
ancestral
Borja.
landowners
Thank
to that.
We're going to ask Mr. Borja. Mr. Borja, are you aware of any properties that have been returned under 106-504 since the law was enacted in 2000?
I'm aware of 4 parcels that are in the process of being returned. One is the Tangison parcel. There are 3 parcels in Tangison. That one in Tangison, I don't believe should go to the original landowner. That was a purchase agreement. It wasn't a condemnation. The USO Hoover Park, as Mr. Burt stated, is being returned. A large part of that property is actually accretion, where the government, the Navy, filled in the beach to make it a nice beach, make it larger. I believe there are 24 lots, private lots in that area. I don't think there's any one bigger than a half acre. And out of those 24 lots, I believe there are 28 original landowners. Back in 1941, I believe we can safely assume a multiplier of 4 as to how many original landowners there are now, or heirs of the original landowners. And then there is the Apra Harbor Parcel 7, which is a parcel across the street from Inonda Bay. It's a wetlands area. That part of that lot was developed by the Army Corps of Engineers to drain Santa Rita and hopefully prevent flooding in there. A certain portion of that lot was also taken by government of Guam before it was returned for the Northern Wastewater Treatment Plan. And the last parcel is the Tamuning Maui Well parcel, which is behind the Tamuning Telephone Exchange, which was already returned previously under another public law, but that's still following in that area. And that is the Tamuning Maui Wells. That's the road back next to the mobile gas station in that area along the cliff line.
Okay, thank you. Does the building of the new hospital or the proposed medical healthcare campus, does this property have any, or will negate any opportunity for other families to utilize the same mode or mechanism that the properties that you just discussed under 106-504? Are there similarities where families can avail to the same processes that you have discussed that are currently being reviewed for the lands that are being returned under 106-504? Am I making sense?
Can you please repeat the question?
Okay, so I asked you a question. I asked you, are there currently properties that are being returned under 106-504?
Okay.
And you mentioned those properties, right? And so now we have this issue discussing the medical campus and Eagles Field, and there was a concern that one of our stakeholders mentioned that, maybe we just write to Congress, write a resolution, and we just remove 106-504 and make it more specific that we demand that the Navy or whoever the federal government is in charge of our land return the property. So is there anything right now that stands as a roadblock that would impede the same process that is being applied today for those families that are currently receiving, or the process that is currently being done under 106-504 for those property owners? Is there anything negating that the properties near the medical campus or the excess land, is there anything negating that cannot be returned to the families? Can we instill the same process?
Man, that was a long question. Is there any process available for the original landowners to get their land back other than 106-504? Is that?
Can we utilize,
Can we utilize 106-504?
Correct.
I
like
don't
we're
believe.
doing now.
I don't believe so, because if you read 106-504, it expressly prohibits the return to a private party without a bid process, actually, for fair market value.
So you're returning properties to family members through a bid process of 106-504?
Not a bid process to the families, a bid process to anybody. It's very interesting. We do have a history on these return lands. It would be interesting to see what happened to those original returns under 103-339.
And under 106-504, you're looking to return the USO property. The concern is the decedents. There's multiple
My
decedents.
recommendation, Senator, is not to the original landowners. All of those are infrastructure returns. For example, USO, it's a recreational, it's a beach. For
But
my
Mr. Birch-
purposes, I would rather return that to the community to use. The Upper Harbor 7 in Agat, it's a wetlands area. Part of that lot, because it was a big lot, has already been returned under 103-339 to the family. That family is actually actively operating a commercial lease on the property, and some of it was kept behind for the southern wastewater treatment plant. The one up in Tangison, that was not a condemnation. The government didn't forcefully come in and say, we're condemning your property. The Navy came in and said, can we buy your property? The original landowner had an agreement. He, I guess, agreed with the money that was being offered by the Navy to buy it and sold it. And now that property is being returned to Gov Guam. But in my opinion, I don't think that should be released to the property owner, because they bought it from him. They didn't condemn it. He willingly sold it, So each of these 4 properties are kind of like, you really have to look at it.
Were they fairly compensated?
I'm sorry?
Was it a fair compensation?
I don't know at that time, on it, And again, it must have been fair to him. He accepted the deal. It wasn't a judicial condemnation. It was a negotiated sale.
Okay, maybe I would disagree with you on that. Mrs. Posadas, thank you for being present today. You mentioned that the ideal location would be in Mangilao because you wanted to ensure that, let me just write my notes real quick, okay? You said that the continuity of care, sorry, I'm not feeling very well. The continuity of care was a concern, so that's why you're the optimum location would be in Mangilao, so you would have public health, behavioral health, and the hospital put together. So how does this guarantee, if public health is on the same campus of GMH, how does that guarantee a continuum of care?
It's not a guarantee, but at least it's an opportunity, it's an option that when patients who are Medicaid, Medicare, MIP patients that are seen at the public health for whatever services that they need at public health, if they get admitted into the Guam Memorial Hospital upon discharge, right now, when they're discharged, we tell them to follow up with public health. Transportation is an issue, but if we have it all on one campus, we can help them, get processed with public health, connect them to
Okay,
public health, and not have to have that.
Okay, thank you. So does that?
Yes, Senator, if I could, pardon my interruption, one of the issues of putting the campus up there, that complex, is to also include a veterans clinic.
Yes,
and
I know.
the veterans clinic there,
Yeah.
you need medical care at the hospital, you're right next door.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And so what is public health going to do with the northern clinic and the southern clinic? Are we just going to do away with that and have a central clinic?
And that's not my jurisdiction or authority to make that decision.
Right.
They fall under a different board also.
Right.
And so I think it's still going to be beneficial to keep those northern and southern clinics
Right.
as outpatient clinics
Right.
for, and if the data shows after a couple of years that it's not being utilized, then maybe it can be commissioned for something else.
Okay.
But I can't make that decision.
Does public health currently have an inpatient clinic or an inpatient
No,
care?
public health is an outpatient community clinic,
Thank
not
you.
an inpatient.
So that's what I'm trying to wrap my head around is I understand we're trying to find ways to build a hospital and to have a medical campus, but the continuity of care is not making sense to me as far as the reasoning if we're still
It's
seeing
there,
patients,
but
if we're
it's
still
not
seeing
consistent.
patients, if we're still seeing patients in the north and in the south, public health does not offer inpatient services. They don't hold their patients overnight, and there's no guarantee that if a patient is sent to the hospital, that they're going to be seen immediately. So it's just kind
Upon
of like the same
discharge.
process that it just seems that this was a design that made sense to a lot of people, and I'm not saying anything bad about the design of things, but I think the continuity of care could be questionable as far as locality is concerned.
Well, it's fragmented. It is really what it is right now, and we're trying to bridge that fragmented gap.
By several miles. You're not improving it. The process is not being improved. We're just building a building, but we're not improving a process.
Well, hopefully that it will improve the process.
Is there an MOA that has been established between public health and GMH?
There's an MOA between public health and GITA for other kinds of services and
Okay.
activities, yes, such as laboratory. So we do have some MOAs, even
Okay.
now with the sharing of nurses.
Okay.
Those are the kinds of MOAs that we have. But as far as for patient care continuity, it's not all that.
Thank you, Mrs. Posadas. Madam Speaker, I sat here for several hours. Thank you, everyone, for being here. I expect us to go a little longer. I mean, this has been an endeavor for many, many years. And I mean, it's just a matter of time where someone says, okay, apparently 106-504 has become a hindrance to us. And I'm wondering who authored 106-504? Do you know, Madam Speaker? Who was the primary author of 106-504?
It's a federal government law.
I believe that it's the primary author, and the reason this thing was authored is because under 103.339, prior to the current law that superseded it, the process of returning property would go to the U.S. GSA, and it would be up for bid. And at that one time, I believe that some organization somewhere in the States, I'm trying to remember the facts, attempted to outbid Guam, and they had first priority, and they wanted to turn our ancestral lands into a homeless shelter
Right.
here. And so
So who authored
the intent,
106-504?
I believe, may have been under former Congressman Underwood.
Who
But
authored 106-504?
I believe that he may have had input to it. I don't have that information on hand right now.
What
But
did
I
you
believe
say?
that the changes made to it happened.
Who authored it?
I'm not
asking.
sure if he was, but he had
Who's
input.
he?
A former Congressman Underwood.
Oh, okay, thank you.
But the
So-
reason for that is to give Guam, which we have now,
Oh, you were present
first
during this
option
time?
to refuse.
Oh, okay.
And that's a big deal.
Okay,
But the
thank
problem
you.
is that he had no control under this when it went into the floor.
Thank
'cause
you,
we have
Mr.
no
Birch.
vote.
I'm sure that he would give a better account than you
Yes,
would
it would be
of the
better for him to do it
situation.
because I'm just
I'm-
trying to
that's all.
remember
Thank you,
facts
thank
that
you.
occurred years
I
ago,
think
20
you're
years
just-
ago.
Yeah, were you
I-
present during that time?
No, No, I wasn't
Okay,
present.
then we
This
don't
was
need
in
your
the
opinion. I was
papers,
just
and
asking fact. Thank you.
So,
So
okay.
106-504 stresses that conditions of transfer, any transfer of excess real property to the government Guam may be only for a public purpose and shall be without further consideration. Then it goes on to read, the property is used only for a public purpose and cannot be converted to any other use. So this is a law that the Congress and Senate voted on. So I would really invite someone to rewrite this, write a resolution to Congress, and let's say, let's
Yes.
do this, and we're not satisfied with this current law. I would be very willing to sign on. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. Senator Duenas.
Sidus Masi, Madam Chair. I'd like to thank first and foremost all the families and those who have the most vested interest for being here today. Madam Chair, without the presence of GITA, it will be impossible to ascertain what we originally came here for, amongst others. So I request that we have a subsequent hearing to bring GITA in to find out what the negotiations were in terms of formulating agreements and other procurements in order to move forward on this issue. Madam Chair, I think the problem we have here is we just had a situation where this entire process was entered into in bad faith. There is precedent. These landowners that are here know that there are landowners on Guam that have repurposed their property either to use it or to have benefit financially for it because it was returned to them. And these landowners that are here today were brought into this process after negotiations were entered into, thereby leaving them out of the process. And even if you try to sit down now and reason for the reasons put forward, it's never going to make sense because they want to know, and I've talked to many of them, they want to know that everything's been exhausted that was established in precedence for all the other families who got their land returned. Now, full disclosure, I also, in case Mr. Bora and Mr. Birch may have been alluding to me, I am the grandson of Jose Pepe Castro Duenas, married to Tong Martinez Camacho Duenas. And I know many of you have seen administrators, not myself because I've never been one, who have worked with ancestral lands and Chamorro Land Trust in good faith because they knew they weren't going to get their land back. Just like people whose land exists under the landing strip for the airport and on and on and on and on. But I feel bad because the families that are here, I believe, have been strung along. And they had to assert themselves and put billboards on their property saying, give me my land back, in order to find out what's really going on, Madam Speaker, Madam Chair. And I'm leading to a couple of questions. What I have heard from these families, Madam Chair, is that they would love to see the process exhausted, whereby their rights that they've seen other tomorrows have the land returned and then move forward if perhaps there's a process beyond that. But be upfront with them and work with them in good faith, not make them come crawling to you to find out what are their rights. That is a disingenuous approach this government should never take for. I believe that the reason why many of these landowners here are questioning as they pursue the return of properties on why, and Mr. Bora, I'll go to you first, there seems to be a confusion. We're talking about Oka Point, Ipaw Point. I was always made to believe the entire thing was Oka, but so that we understand the footprint of land we're talking about here, where the old hospital was, what is the official name or designation of that land area, Mr. Bora?
Lot 1015-3-R6. That is the correct Ipaw Point. Oka Point is where the now hospital is.
Okay, so now that we're clear from somebody who I do hold in high esteem as being the walking land recorder of land, understanding land properties on Guam, I appreciate that.
I must object, Senator. I don't know everything.
Okay, well, 99.9% of everything.
Not even that.
I understand you don't want to receive the compliments, Jesus Masi. My point is this, and maybe I'll go to Ms. Lillian here because this is going to be apropos to my line of questioning. What was the bed capacity of the former GMH before the current GMH was acquired?
My apologies, Senator. I don't remember, but I used to work there. The intensive care unit itself was only 4-bed. Medical surgical, probably around 20-some beds. Pediatric, probably another 20 or 15 beds. I can't remember the total count, but those were the basic traditional acute care beds that we made available. We didn't even have a telemetry unit. It was just a medical surgical, a surgical, pediatric, intensive care unit was what we had. We also had a wing that was called the tuberculosis wing, the TB wing. And so that was what the traditional bed capacity back then in the old hospital. In the new hospital, we have about 161 acute care beds, and then at the SNF, we have 40 beds that are certified by CMS. That's our bed capacity, but you know that that's not sufficient. We have a lot of people waiting to get a bed, so that's why we do need to have a new hospital with more beds to accommodate people.
Certainly. So I'll come back to
Senator,
Mr. Bora.
if I
Yes.
could add to that, I'm young enough to remember that Department of Mental Health was also at the end there.
Yes. I'm even, I was the kid who grew up around there, so I even remember that too.
I was afraid you were going to say you were a client there, Senator.
No, not yet. But the process that this thing went through might drive me there.
What's your sentence?
Yeah,
What's your question,
the inefficiency and what has been done to people might drive anyone there, Mr. Bora. So, Mr. Bora, my question is this to you now again. On Ipaw Point and the lot number that you just enumerated, I think I've been made to know there's about 66 acres on that piece of property. Is that correct?
The entire lot at one time was about 55 acres. However, it's been subdivided 8 acres. Actually, the entire property went to the Chamorro Land Trust in Public Law 25-179. And subsequent to that, a 9-acre portion was cut out for the Kuturan Chamorro. I believe a 10 or 12-acre portion was cut out for the Naftan Manaynata. And a couple of acres were cut out for the Healing Heart Center. Yeah. So it's now down about to, I would say, probably only 19 acres, inclusive of easement that would need to be put in there.
What is the current size of the property of Oka Point where the hospital sits right now?
I believe it was 16 acres. I know we did a multiplication on that one, but I'm not sure.
16 acres, right?
I,
Just
I'm,
so
I'm not
17.
sure. Don't
Yeah,
take me
16 or
on that.
17
Senator.
is what I know.
Okay. So 19 acres, 16 acres, I think we might be getting pretty close. My point is this. We keep talking about the co-location of the properties. Because we build a new hospital doesn't mean that GMH is not still in our inventory. We're right down the road from the new hospital. We could probably still build on Ipaw Point. Mental health is currently behavioral health. I'm old enough to know, Mr. Boyer, that it's changed because our times have changed. We've got different nomenclature. Behavioral health and wellness is located right now next to the Guam Memorial Hospital. Sounds like you've got a medical complex in Tamuning. If you repurpose the old hospital, which I hope we'll start fixing soon, to fix the roof, to change the panel maybe, my point is that because it's a dream and a proposal, this is the policy-making body of the government. And that's why we're also so perplexed and upset about this process, because even us, we have to question to find out what are the meetings in the hotels and all of this working group things that are happening, probably so that we can come back down here and be told, ta-da, we've got this beautiful, shiny, multi-complex proposal. It's estimated at $2.5 billion, legislature. Don't tell the people of Guam that you don't support health care, because if you don't do this, you don't support their health. And I think that's an insult. So the reason why I make these points, Madam Speaker, is we do have to ascertain what was the process going forward of the procurement and the current status of all of that activity, and then not be told that this is the only drawing board that you can go to based on the analysis that has been done in a vacuum and a silo. And to keep hope alive for landowners who have seen the precedents of return lands and advocate, like you said you were going to advocate, for the return. And if it has to, in the end, come down to the only option left is to work with them and find mechanisms for exchange or money, then I'm sure they'll accept it at some point on behalf of their families. But they want you to fight first. And they don't want to be taken for granted and be told that they don't understand with their own eyes when they look at Oka Point and Ipaw Point and see that there's over 40 acres there with an adjacent complex that's already a behavioral services. In fact, our current administrator, Madam Speaker, was there when there was a complete team that was put together to assess services at the current hospital on outpatient basis under HMAT. And it was found to be feasible. So I'm just saying, Madam Chair, I think we're far from walking away from the drawing board here. And what I've heard this afternoon and tonight is that the landowners want to see everything exhausted. They want to be treated in a way that is dignified. And that just because a bill has been introduced to promise them money is not the right way to treat this situation. The negotiation under any other land returns and the like was the value of the land, the inherent value of the land. Not to tell the legislature, you pass it along to the taxpayers and pay up. Use what the value is. Let them use what the value is to negotiate. I don't think we can say it any other way, Madam Chair, because when we negotiate in bad faith, this is where we end up. Because of a rush to a project and something that is the formulation of a few. Nobody in this room doesn't want a hospital bed to go to for their loved ones and their family, for heaven's sake. But they also don't want something shoved down their throat so that they have to kneel to that situation. So I put it on the record to say, Madam Chair, I think that the Land Committee should not be going away from the drawing board, should not just accept the proposals that's put forward, and to hold our own hearings and roundtables to see the plans and the procurement that went forward. If it takes all of next year, and that's one of the primary duties of this that the next legislature does, then do it. But please don't insult these people and their families by making them feel as though there's a price for this. Negotiate in good faith. Jesus Masi, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator. And I haven't forgotten that we have the chairperson and the vice chair of the Ancestral Lands. We have Mr. David Lotz online. We have Mr. Ken Leon Guerrero to testify. We have Maria Hernandez, David Underwood, and Antonio Sablan who signed up. So senators, just to let you know that. And so Senator Taitukui, you've been the first one here. My apologies. Thank you for waiting.
Madam Chair, if I may, this is Lillian. If I just make one point, highlight one point. One of the reasons, and I will say that I also want the hospital or the medical campus in Manila area, is so that the people of the South will have it more accessible and available. Because that's one of their concerns, is it's always up north and it's further drive for them. So central location of a hospital is really to benefit also not just, but the whole island. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. First, I want to acknowledge Mr. Chinorio, Adonkalu Sujus Masi for testifying today, as well as Mr. Cabrera, Frank Lujan. I think we went to school together. It's good to see you. Chris Flores, thank you so much for your passionate support for this. Mr. Cruz and Maria Cruz, Adonkalu Sujus Masi. I'm sorry your government has failed you. But we're here to do as much as we can to fight, because I do know you do want the hospital. We need a new hospital. It's the bottom line. The hospital's 45 years old. It's falling apart. We do need one, and I know that everybody here wants that to happen too. So let's roll up our sleeves and not take away the dignity of losing your land. That's all we have. This island is very small, like you said, Mr. Birch. Or even Mr. Chinorio, when you talked about it, the 31 miles long, 45 at most point on this island. Land is precious. Nobody wants to let that go. We pass it on to generation. So let's get down to brass tacks here. In our last meeting, I've attended those task force meetings a couple times, and it seemed to have ended in November 4th, 2021 was my last task force that I went to, but I haven't seen one since. That's 2021. In that meeting that I had, there was comments that was written what is HTF, link request? Does that sound familiar? HTF, it's an acronym for something, link request.
I think that's
Okay,
where
hospital
the
task force,
GITA,
right? Okay.
GITA has that, the healthcare task force.
Okay, and then what is also the acronym ACOE? Army Corps of Engineers?
Engineer,
Okay.
correct.
And the LP?
LP.
LP, 2.76 million estimated from Colonel Marshall. What is LP?
I don't know what the LP, but the charrette was the estimate.
On 2.7, okay.
Something like that, 1.7 or
Okay.
2.7 million, right.
Okay.
That was the estimate that was expressed, given to us verbally by Lieutenant Colonel Eric.
Okay, and all the on all the meetings that I attended, and of course the task force, it's online for everyone to see?
The link is online, created by GITA.
Okay, so it's under GITA's
Yes,
website,
under
it's
GITA.
not under, okay.
Not under GMH.
You know, just for our listening audience, because I'm sure, you know, they don't see all these areas and locations that Mr. Bohr had brought up. Where on the website, Guam Economic, I'm under GITA right now. Do you know where exactly, Lillian, where that be located?
The link gets sent to us by the staff of GITA, but I don't know where in GITA in their website.
I don't see it here anywhere,
Okay.
and send me the link, but I don't see it
The
here.
LC, Senator, the LC is the Lieutenant Colonel Eric.
Downloads.
That's his rank.
Okay. So, by the way, Lillian or Joe, do you have the copy of the October 5th, 2020 letter from the governor to the Secretary of Navy? This is one that was brought up by Mr. Cabrera earlier. Vincent brought it up. He's never even seen the letter. Do you have a copy of that?
I don't know particularly, you know, the exact letter. What is it, October?
It was the governor's letter to Secretary of Navy. I mean, we have the letter here, the one from January 15th, 2021, where it clearly says, thank you for your October 5th, 2020 letter for taking the time to meet with me during Guam, or their Guam visit. But we can't seem to find the October 5th, 2020 letter from the governor to the secretary. So if we can get a copy of that, it seems to be around. So 2020, October 5th, 2020. October 5th, 2020, okay? It was okay. Lillian, has there been an RFP release at all? No RFP has been released at all.
RFP for what?
RFP. How about you, Joe? Any RFP regarding the new hospital?
No.
Not from land management.
Okay, has there been an RFP sent out regarding any kind of assessment or survey?
Not from GMH.
Okay,
we
just
haven't
wanted to make
issued out
sure.
any.
I'm going to see how, we all want to know is the ball already rolling and nobody knows about it? We don't want anything hidden behind, you know, smoke screens here. We want to know what you're doing currently right now and the assessment of property. Has there been, as a SHREC assessment started yet?
As a what? What was the question, Senator?
Has the charrette.
Has the SHREC started yet the assessment?
Shred?
Yeah,
Charrette.
the part of the Army Corps of Engineers, we had a meeting with them. They were telling us that it would probably take about 4 years even to do an assessment, 3 to 4 years. But it would take about 1 year just for the SHREC
Charrette.
or 1 to 2 years just for the SHREC to come up with an assessment. Has the SHREC started any kind of movement whatsoever?
We're not involved with the Army Corps of Engineers, the charrette, yeah.
Okay, but you might not be involved, but you also know.
We have
Okay.
no knowledge of any charrette
Okay.
that's been done officially.
So they're not involved anymore?
Army Corps? No.
Or
they're
the
not.
SHREC?
Charrette has not been done, not to my knowledge.
Okay. So, Mr. Burge, I know that you brought up some information, and I had the opportunity to talk with Joey Leon Guerrero. Thank you so much, Joey. I asked for you to be up here because you're an individual that's been in this capacity a lot longer than any of the directors here when it comes to what's going on with ancestral lands as well as Chamorro Land Trust. I appreciate it. And I'm going to ask you a question later on, but You know, Mr. Birch, I know it hurts, what you said, it hurts, but, you know, it hurts worse is having your land taken away, you know, and what we want to do is just stop the hurting. That's what we want to do. Yeah. And we're hoping that your agency does everything it can possible to find ways to resolve this, but to find ways to bring back the land to our people that was taken away. But Joey, can you explain to me what's the difference between the land scenario in Tizen on the airstrip versus the land in Eagles Field? I mean, the covenants that govern either or. You were kind of explaining it to me outside, the difference between the two, if the lands were to be given back to the people through land. So if you can just start from, just to simplify it, start from Tizen, how that property was given and what was the covenants that surrounded it, and what those families who are living in Tizen right now, or in the where the land airstrip is at, what they have to basically not endure but anticipate, and then versus if Eagles Field were to be given back to the government of Guam, and the government of Guam then give it to Ancestral Lands to give to the people there. Can you start first with that? Please state your name for the record and where you work too.
Okay, my name is Joey Leon Guerrero. I'm with the Guam Ancestral Lands Commission. And so, I hope I'm going to answer this correctly, but with the Tizen landowners within the GIA footprint, I guess their remedy would be through the Land Bank Trust, because we cannot return their land back to them, or at least the government of Guam. And so with the Eagles Field, I'm going to assume that they would also, or we would like for them to fall under the Land Bank Trust if the land cannot be returned. So I don't know if that's what you're asking. Is there a difference, or is there a similarity as far as the return or the hindrance that they're?
Yes.
Is that what you're asking?
Would it be the same type of process that's happening at Tizen? Because it was mentioned earlier that.
Yeah. So with Tizen, you know, there was a law passed, 26-100, that required any unused portions within the airport to be returned or transferred to Gov Guam. And the airport, I guess they said because of covenants with their loans, that they would not be able to transfer lands back. Is that the area you're referring to? Because Tizen is made of several areas. I mean, there's the portion that used to be the GITA Economic Development Area. There was the officers' housing. So just to be sure, though, which portion of Tizen are you?
The officers' housing area?
So
location?
officers' housing was returned under BRAC, given to Gov Guam. With Tizen, that was returned, through GITA. And then GITA was the Local Reuse Development Authority, who would then transfer to Ancestral Lands. With the airport, that went straight to the airport. So that's the two differences. With Eagles Field, I guess that return would go to, based on 106-504, that would go to the governor of Guam. And then from there, we would see where it would go from there.
Could it go to Ancestral Lands?
It doesn't go. It doesn't go directly to Ancestral Lands.
No, it doesn't. But you said it goes straight to the governor. You know, the government.
It would
of Guam?
go to the government of Guam. Sorry, not the governor, but it would go. The deed would be to the government of Guam.
Right. And
first.
then from there, it could be then deposited into the Ancestral Lands?
Then it would go in the excess lands registry, and then I believe then the Department of Land Management would then notify Ancestral Lands to enter that property into the the excess lands registry. And then part of the process is we would have to notify government agencies first and give them the opportunity to see if they needed the property, and if they did, that particular agency then would need to compensate the landowners. So it's a long process, but and so and the thing with Ancestral Lands is there's two I guess missions: return land back and compensate landowners who can't get their land back. So there's there's always that other option. And I just, it's there. Mm-hmm. So for us, we're just kind of sitting back, waiting, and see what will happen, how this land will be transferred, or when it will be transferred, then we'll figure that out.
Okay. Okay, I just wanted to hear from you. Thank you so much, Joey. Mr. Borja, was there any mention still with the military that they plan on using the property, Eagles Field nearby, to do a missile defense system in that area? Is there still talk of that going on?
Not with me, I mean, not that I'm aware of.
You're not aware. How about you, Lillian? Have you heard anything about a DOD missile defense system in that area of Eagles Field?
No, ma'am. I haven't gotten any communication.
Nobody has heard
or
about that. Nobody
information.
heard this conversation that was going on, that the military, one of the letters that came in from the Secretary of Navy was talking about that in one of their letters, so I'll have to share that with the chair to follow through on this one.
I'm not included in that communication.
Okay, it was mentioned earlier about the, using the old hospital facility. Lillian, it's $1.6 billion to create this healthcare facility with behavioral wellness as well as public health to be side by side. Some people are calling it the Taj Mahal of healthcare area. It's about $1.1 billion plus another couple $1 million for some assessments. But just the hospital alone, put aside all the other areas, just the hospital alone, is the cost still at $606 million just for the hospital alone?
That's the estimate, that's the TAC price that the Army Corps of Engineers gave us in terms of that option to replace, to build a new hospital, estimating it at $743 million. To repair and renovate the hospital, to keep it going operational, was $761 million.
And Mr. Borja, isn't it, you've been in the business a long time, especially at land management. Are you aware that Army Corps of Engineers usually inflates their cost when it comes to giving any kind of assessment?
That's not my lane on the financing or the Army Corps of Engineers. I'm in the land
I
lane.
thought you would know that, yeah, since you've dealt with them before in the past, but they've inflated. So we're looking at about $660 million to build just the hospital by itself. Now the next question is, just the hospital alone, can it fit in that area of the old hospital that's on the cliff where we had our,
If we're going to increase the bed capacity and if we're going to make sure we have enough parking, right now where we are, that's about 16 acres, and we're struggling. We're struggling with space, we're struggling with parking. To build a new hospital in that 17-acre lot at the old hospital, we're going to face the same issue. So again, why spend all that money in a location where it's, again, small, and we're not going to be able to expand? And especially given what we've experienced with COVID, we had to retrofit a lot of spaces to then accommodate COVID patients and make, bed space available for more patients. We're going to do that again in the new hospital in that location where it's already limited.
It's almost sounding like there's two locations. Some say Oka Point, and then the other one says the old hospital. There's not two.
Oka Point is the old hospital.
Right.
The old hospital is at the Oka Point. Epal Point was the very, very old hospital. Remember the very old hospital?
That's the one.
I'm sorry if I'm aging you, but the very old hospital I used to work. I used to work in that hospital. It had mental health, like Joe pointed out. It also had public health at the other end. So 3 health agencies were in one location. And it worked out. And so, again, we can go back to that concept of having all 3 health agencies connected, interconnected in one campus.
Yeah, I understand that the campus would be nice to have, but at this point, with the cost of how much it's going to cost at $1.1 billion, as well as, we have a behavioral wellness, a very nice one, near the hospital. And
it's not just about nice, but it's also very beneficial, very
don't get me wrong, in every aspect of the word.
Yeah.
But how many hospital beds, if you were to, can you actually combine the two, the Oka Point and the EPAL part together? Can you combine it or connect it somehow to to make it fit? I mean, how many bedrooms exactly is it that you're looking at? Based on that, we already have beds at the GMRC, and you have to incorporate Navy as well. So how many more beds do we need for a new hospital? And
First
our
of all-
population now has gone down to like, what, 165,000 people compared to 175?
But we also need to look ahead, be visionary about it, because our
In the last
population
20
is
years,
gonna-
Lillian, last 20 years, our population has done nothing but decline in
But
the
we
last
want-
20
we
years.
wanna hope that there will
Oregon
be
stayed
more.
stagnant.
For the
nothing
economy,
is really.
for the economy of the island, we'd like to see that there'll be more. We'd like to bring people who have left Guam to come back, especially those who have gone to medical school and nursing school. We'd like to bring them back, and that's what we'd like to,
No,
to
absolutely.
hope for.
But can you tell me how many beds? Can you tell me how many beds?
Based on this was a year ago, 2 years ago, when we were doing the research in terms of how many beds to build. It was a rate of, was it 5 beds per 100? I can't remember the formula, but there is a formula to then have an estimate in terms of how many beds you would have for a certain population.
Right. Right. So you don't have those numbers of the
Not
new
right off the
hospital?
top of my head, I don't, but I do
intention
have the
for new
document.
hospital? Joe?
No, we do land, we don't do buildings.
Okay, because this is, since last year we've been talking about this new hospital, and you can't even come up with the number of beds?
We're using the formula that is, based on research. That's what I was using. I just don't have it with me, and I don't have it on the top of my head.
We should have
can't
some-
remember everything.
I'm not going to belabor. It's already almost 5:30, and I don't want to hold off anymore. I know we've got a couple more to go, but I'm going to sit here and give my support to the families of Eagles Field to bring that land back to their rightful owners, and it's them. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Terlaje.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Before I share my thoughts, I just want to thank everybody that testified regarding, the land taking and all that. And I don't know if any of you remember that several years ago, Angel Santos and I ran for governor and lieutenant governor. And this is what it is. Angel and I wanted to return those properties back to the original landowners. And it touches me. And we talk about judicial condemnation. We talk about things that we need to do to really force the federal government to return those landowners back to the landowners. Either we should have done and move away from that judicial condemnation. I don't know which judge did this, or we should introduce some kind of resolution supporting the return of those properties back. And of course, let me just say, Manilu, Maninaw, Manatungo, Naungan preciso is pitat. Lord, my heart is with you guys. Because Angel and I fought for that. He even went to jail. He was locked up because he tried to clean his own property that was taken away by the federal government, and they put him in jail. And ladies and gentlemen, at this point in time, I will continue to support you, the landowners. I would not shy away. And of course, I will support the construction of a new hospital because we need that new hospital to take care of our people. But ayade, dadang kulo tanotan itanot sa Moro. Why do we have to go to Mangilo and choose a property there? Hafa. Manilu, Maninaw, Manatungod, and Turu Samjuni, Mamgagigino, Gwinina, Aani. Hamini 15 na senador. Fanmanhongi. Na manggaygi. Hinasun mami, jani kurasun mami. Tampaben sa potyam zo. Timegagay zo, jang komento so, gwini gi Mike. Lobe sang na. Na to di testimonyo ni masangan gwini. Ligat na pensangan. Da pwede amon. Maasi si Diyos. Da konsidera hamzo. Da jili tati. Itang ni Diyos. Si Diyos maasi.
Just want to see Senator Blas.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Speaker. And thank you for all who are here to testify today. A couple questions, and I'm going to go back, refer to something that was always discussed, but never really questioned, and I'm going to question it here. But before we go on, Ms. Posadas, with regard to any meetings, I guess there was a task force, there's a task force put together to discuss the creation or the construction of a health campus. When's the last time you guys had a meeting?
Oh gosh, it's been a while. I can't recall when was the last time, but it's been a while.
It's been a while.
We haven't had one in the last 4 months.
In the last 4 months. So really not so much a priority right now, right?
Well, yeah.
Yeah, okay. But in that meeting, was there a discussion? Obviously, this whole concern with regard to where the campus wants to be located, was there any discussion in these task force meetings of alternative sites to the campus?
Yes.
Where would these alternative sites be?
The different options, as well, shared by Joe Borja, Attica was one of them. The Epal Point was another one.
Okay.
Of course, Oka was also where we are currently. That's another site. South Finagajan up north.
Okay.
That was one option that military offered, is what I understand. But again, because it's already up north, GRMC is right next to it, we felt that will not really serve the people of Guam, in best interest, because the south will not, again, it's still far.
But so it's not dead set. We're not dead set here with Eagles Field, right?
Well, it's the preferred site.
It's a preferred
Central
site, but it's not
Manila.
dead set. Because since you haven't talked about this in the last 4 months, there hasn't been any movement on this thing.
We haven't had any movement because
No,
there's really
okay.
not much of anything.
So it's not dead set. You can move it elsewhere.
I'm not married to it.
Yeah, okay, great.
But, I would prefer
Great.
Manila.
Because then, another thing that was bothering me about during this hearing here, we kept talking about a meeting last night. Okay? And maybe if I can ask Mr. Lujan, Frankie, if you can come up, I need to ask you okay? The reason why I'm going to bring Frank Lujan is he and I worked in the police department together, so I know that, okay, he used to boss me around because he used to be my boss. Now I can talk to him a little bit better. Okay? But Frankie, did you attend that meeting last night?
I did.
Okay. What was that meeting about?
Essentially, that meeting was about the proposed bill that the governor wanted to introduce to the legislature. It was more or less one to try to get our support and to let us know that through that bill that there is a possibility of compensation to be offered to the landowners.
Why your group?
I don't know actually why our group, other than the fact that we've had the initial meeting with the governor earlier this year and subsequent meeting pursuant to our direction to GITA. So we also met with GITA and discussed the viable options of compensation. But ever since the beginning, the position of the governor was to use that property, to take our property and build a hospital on it.
Okay, interesting enough. Because let me go back to Mr. Leon Guerrero all the way down at the end. Because there's a discussion here between the difference between Teason Airfield and Eagles Field. Teason Airfield, who owns it now, legally?
Right now, it's under the Guam International Airport Authority.
Which is the government of Guam.
Yes, sir.
Eagles Field, who owns it?
The federal government.
Federal government. Now, here's where I'm getting a little concerned. How can we provide compensation for land that we don't own?
That's part of the enabling legislation of 2545.
That's what I'm saying, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, see, 106, 25. So, in other words, in order for this meeting to come to fruition, the government of Guam would have to be in possession of the land, as in the case of Teason, before they can dish out any compensation.
That actually needs to be clarified, and that's a resolution that was sent to the legislature around 2017. We needed to clarify who would the beneficiaries of the land bank trust would be, because the board...
Yeah, I understand the beneficiaries of the land bank, but let's talk now. I'm still a little confused here as to how the governor is going to try to compensate these landowners for land the government of Guam doesn't even own.
Through the land bank trust.
Yeah,
our
but
agency, how? So the mechanism we have right now is we take existing Crown land or Spanish Crown lands or non-ancestral lands, and we lease those properties out, and we generate income.
To compensate them for what?
We compensate landowners who didn't get their land back.
Okay, so what I'm getting at here is, let me give you a little, an analogy here. You own the home, okay? I like the home, and you're not staying in the home. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lease the home to Mr. Borja here, because you're not staying in the home, but I don't own the home. See what I'm getting at?
Yes, I understand.
Okay.
But that's the way the legislature wrote the law, that we're supposed to correct
The legislature wrote the
injustice.
law on the premise that the government of Guam retains or holds property title to the land.
No. That's where we need clarification.
That's where it says right here in 106, in the law. I'm reading it. That's what I've been doing all
No,
all afternoon,
2545 is our enabling legislation, and we're supposed to help provide compensation or, I guess, any ancestral right that anybody has. That's the purpose of Ancestral Lands Commission, is to correct that injustice.
If I may, it is, the land bank is intended to compensate those whose property was not returned by the government of Guam.
That's right. So it has to be in the
It was
property.
returned by the federal government, kept by the government of Guam.
Right. That's what I'm getting
Those are the
at.
ones, yes.
So before anything of this happens, the government of Guam has to retain property of the land, which she doesn't want to do. I'm a little confused here. Now I see I've got you more confused too, right?
No, and that's the point we were making with that resolution that we sent back in 2017. We need the legislature to clarify who the beneficiaries are, and the sitting commissioners right now can affirm that.
Sure.
That they've been battling this. They've been trying to come up with these land bank rules and regulations since 2002, and they're always arguing, who do we compensate? Lands that GovGom's still holding, or everybody? And everybody's like, well, I think it should be everybody because everybody's dispossessed.
I understand.
Right? But then you have others that, well, why are we responsible? Why do we have to compensate landowners or lands that we didn't return back, or that? Why is GovGuam responsible for it?
Okay, Mr.
So
Birch.
there's, you might feel that it's clear cut, but again, we don't.
And I appreciate that. Thanks, Mr. Leon. Mr. Birch, you got your red light on. Do you want to say something?
Yes. The speaker is absolutely correct that currently, as the law is written, we cannot compensate the people whose properties have not been returned. And those properties are potential return. They're not returned. So technically they can't be compensated by the land bank. And that's why we came up with what we call the Land Bank Reform Act of 2022 to include those folks whose properties are used by GovGuam, leased or licensed, because their property, we're getting benefit from it, and so they should also be paid for that. And that would include, for example, even Tijan. It's kept by GovGuam. So those people who owns property up at Tijan, the Tijan Trust, for example, you can't even go to the airport. Your ancestors owned the property, but you can't even get a parking slot there. You have to pay for your own parking. But they're using your property. So the idea behind the Reform Act is have the airport pay for the lease of that, and those monies will go to the original landowners. The same thing would be for Eagles Field. Should the hospital or the medical campus be built there? It's a way of giving them compensation. So it's not going to be like the Tijan Trust where you don't get anything at all. It's trying to find a resolution around this. It's thinking outside
Thank you,
the box.
Mr. Birch. You just tell me
Outside
why
the
these guys had the meeting last night. It wasn't for the Land Bank Trust. It's so that you can get for these people to understand and to appreciate or to accept compensation in lieu of the property that they want
But
back.
the land bank would be responsible for developing the rules of
Thank
regs
you very much for
and getting them
clarifying to
and
the
compensating people
why you had the
rightfully
meeting
and
last night.
justly.
I was really
And-
interested in wondering why you would have a meeting the night before this hearing to talk about this.
But
In the
there's also
guise
more
of,
to it.
although nothing in the
But there's-
proposal says anything about Eagles Field, it is clear now.
But it's for everyone. It's not
It's-
just Eagles Field. It's
Yeah,
for
but you use
everybody.
them.
No, it's for everyone. We've been working on this for months. We have been working on this for months. It's not something that happened overnight. And it's involved a lot of people and a lot of agencies. Land management's been involved, GITA's been involved, Ancestral Lands has been involved, and of course, even we've had the lawyers at the governor's office very much involved, and other people too outside of that.
Outside of the people that are asking for their property
we've
back.
had meetings with them, and that's a part, we've had meetings with them before these things have
Don't
been.
you find it very interesting, Mr. Birch, that you
but
had
the
this
other
meeting
thing
the
is
night
not-
before
it's not
this
just-
hearing?
It's not just for that. It's also to allow for a land exchange for those who want it, to give them options. Of course, there's some that are going to want their own ancestral lands back exactly where they're at, but to allow for land
Okay.
exchange.
Thank
to
you very
give
much.
various options.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Mr. Flores.
Thank you, Senator. I just want to make a point of clarification here, and all the landowners were here during the March 4th. That was the first initial meeting we had with the governor, correct? Remember in March when we had the first meeting with the governor? Okay, some of you weren't there, but Primo, you were there, right? Because I was there. So the point that I'm trying to make here is, again, that public law that was made in 2000 stated, and Mr. Birch testified honestly, that the federal government said, okay, these are excess lands, which was Eagles Field, was going to be returned back to GovGuam, but it's only under GovGuam use. If it's not under GovGuam use for its purposes, then it goes back to the federal government. Isn't that what we were told, Primo? Okay, so I went back and I told my father, and I said that if GovGuam is not going to use that property, we're not an option. We don't have an option to get our land back. It goes back to the federal government. That's what I went back and told my father, and that's why I asked the speaker. I said, if there's a loophole, or she mentioned that there was only one attorney that gave an interpretation of that law. Mr. Birch is saying he spoke to three attorneys and one AG. I just want to get down to the facts. If it's true that that law that was passed in 2000, that federal law, that if excess land is going back to government of Guam and it's not going to be used for government of Guam purposes, it goes back to the federal government. If that is true, then we're at a stalemate. And that's when we need your support to try and go back to Congress and change that law.
Okay, and that's why this whole thing is about.
Okay, so that's my bottom line.
Okay, and I appreciate that. This is why I was concerned. Now I'm disturbed at why a meeting the day before in this hearing is occurring. Now I know why. Okay, now we know why.
Now,
okay, and you know, Primo, please, if you can beg my indulgence here, is first, if even at that, even if that were the case, okay? GovGuam cannot compensate you for property that the government of Guam doesn't have in its possession.
Okay, so let me make that point. Let me make a rebuttal to that point. So what the governor was trying to do was that if she does take possession of that property that the government, the federal government is declaring excess, and she's going to use it for government of Guam purposes, she was trying to find a way to compensate us.
Okay.
Either through land exchange, monetary compensation, or what was the other one? It was land exchange, monetary compensation. What's that?
The three is return the property,
Okay.
exchange, or compensation.
Okay. That's all she was trying to meet with us back in March and last night.
Okay, and thank you very much, because that wasn't very clear as to why. Okay? So thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you very much. Oh, and by the way, the land belongs to you.
Thank you. Okay, so we have a few more people left to testify. If I could call them up. We've got the chair, the vice chair of Ancestral Lands Commission, Mr. Dave Lotz is on virtual. Mr. Ken Leon Guerrero. Is there David Underwood? Maria Hernandez? Is there David Underwood? Okay, I think that's everyone. So this will be our last round. Thank you all. If the administrators could please wait, yeah. If you don't mind, yeah, for this last round of testimony. I'd appreciate it. Thank you very much. Okay, so we'll begin with the chairperson, Ancestral Lands Commission, Mr. Aclavea.
Buenas, Madam Speaker and senators. Do you have any questions for me, or are you trying to find out the position of where the commission is at with regard to?
Yes, I am.
The commission, as far as I'm concerned, with the commission, we've just been given slight heads up that they want to use the Eaglesville property, and we got this maybe a year and a half ago, and that's basically what we know right now as far as the process of acquiring the property and the work that's being done for the information and infrastructure. We have really no idea about it. But I just want to reiterate that the board, the commission has been, part of our mission statement is really to support the original landowners, of course. Their priority, they're first. And we would like to see all properties that are releasable go to the original landowners. And then if anything else needed to be done, from there the government can basically negotiate with those families. And part of our mission statement, and we reaffirm that mission statement regarding where the board stands with this, we definitely believe that all releasable lands should go first to the original landowners, and then from there the government entities should go to them and deal with them in some way. So we did that. We reaffirmed our mission statement with resolution number 2021-010, and I'll just run through it real fast, just the bottom part. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but it says, now therefore be it resolved, the Guam Ancestral Lands Commission Board of Commissioners attests to the reaffirmation of its mission statement pursuant to Title 21, Guam Code Annotated, Chapter 80, and Public Law 25-45, which defines the Guam Ancestral Lands Commission as land claims facilitator, mandates the establishment of a land bank trust, and compels just compensation as return of ancestral lands and or monetary compensation by, number one, facilitating the return of excess U.S. federal and government of Guam lands to their original owners, and number two, pursuing and advocating for the rights of original landowners and their heirs, and the return of excess U.S. federal and government of Guam lands to their original owners. And number 3, maintaining a land bank trust for those disposed original landowners who will never realize the return of their ancestral lands. I would like to comment just a little bit on that U.S. Public Law 106-504. I know that it's we do have Public Law 22-145 regarding our government's stance on the return of excess federal lands. I'm of course for it. I mean, I'd like to follow our local law, and with the the complexity of the matter and the implications of that law, U.S. Public Law 106-405, there's a little bit of complexity, because basically we could return the lands, but then the landowners would have issues with the cloud on the title, or even getting title insurance, or even marketing or getting loans for their property. But I would like to leave that to the landowners, let them know the the implications and follow our local law. That's just my personal opinion as the chairman of the Ancestral Lands Commission. So of course, once again, I'd like to reiterate that the commission all these years advocates for basically the original landowners first. Si Diyos masi.
Si Diyos masi. I'm glad to hear that. That has been the situation all along. Si Diyos masi. The Vice Chair, Mr. Laguarña.
Si Diyos masi. Dididia tetenan sa podungis no. Besa ngonyo. Maski gaigi Amerika. Gini ni spiritu ni manay nata na gaigi zo gini. Si Rano Tenorio Labutsu Laguarña Gaddi zo. Nyetu zo gi uno gi lahin. Imangairen siya ni Tano giza kunehu tijan. Sulat 2156. Itano as tatao bihu. Si Jose Padilla Laguarña. Pamilyang Gaddi. Bonitos din na dinanya. Si Diyos masi loki ganawas. Todo samson ni mangai ganaw. Senora Guerrero, Legislatura, Senador Dueñas, Senadora Perez, Senadora Taitagui, Senador Pido Terlaje, dan si staba gini si Frank Blas. Si Diyos masi ni manggagam zu na mananggam zu para inhingok estisya na tinistigo pago na ani dyan esta pupuengi. Bonito siya sa manunguzo na ti oka poy na zu ulog ikuturan sa moro agas masasangan na oka zu pago no tungo na ipaw. Puntan ipaw. Za idza oka anay gagi ispitat pago na momento. Za pwede tibe fanu tau sa sempia un dia menos pago malongwit sa manggagit sa pigi ulo. Da puede ti mapunuit loki gi ulo. O pa madisatendio nai. Hai dele ni gita su. Gita su na kabadzero ni muna timona mahat sa gi gato. Munga tazutia gi gato. Munga de na su lo ungan zao na para managwaha. Nuevo na espetat lo susti guardi 102 na akrias. Dale staju. Kalau neji mangguigwifi mampus, za ifasilidad siya ni para mahatsagwi, lekun na mangkontentua, mamolika azu na fasilidad neji mangge papa siya para neji iman malongo gita gititanus para hafafan na atensyon man necesita. Lo hagagasa magait senadora. Nama nata Tuhan. Muntunga pedu manita jadi difunto angin. Itano sagrado itano. These are sacred lands. Cetun ihaga imantau tauta. Guihi mismo
na oda. Gaigi espiritu ni manainanya siya guihi. Parewa jangwao loki gita tijan. Lastima membro zo loki gi segundo ge hulu gano gi komisyon. Lo estapago di man nanayam ni masya hafa gui. Mutumas anu malumu gi pabe fan dispidi. Pabe fan apasi para bebe suguna karita halum gui. Mamai sinu masya nejut manelu man senedor man senedora mentras man nandangaham para man manai didi ni sikira o manafan manayam ni ocenta na familia lugar na pabem fan sugu halum gi za para ben park itu mobil mami gui gi eji 10-15 minutos sa za o mapasilista ina an mami dan ni familia dan ni todo siya so masya fan mafatinasyam lisensya za alok estigi hami gini manduenyo Jesus masino na tetendi tano parami lo ni edso agas mamaisino na mamalaw eno maniluhu laknus gini ni isensyan mizo imanainan mizo giman malofan tempo na tsogi idinansi tsogi diretso esti tano basta hit nesti tano basta hit maekungong loki federalis man tsagugo gatugui ta contrast lai publiko 106.504 apa na para tasedia no sangani munga basta neti patafan amen edzigi na palabra nasu si difuntuangin basta hit man amen jam basta neti basta sotta polo lea polo edzigi siya palabras hagas maila datafan natsu edzigi like ninya siya manauto para mangkolonisa tay manuit patafan mangkolonisa jang initisinya ta nasua ihinasun kolonisa ta regla itanota ta tugi idzota constitution basta neno siya ta fan mumo jan siya basta tio mahatme gini para mapune todo ta fanatsu jan ipamalo siya na nasyon tanagi za Iran manatatsugi put matampin matanya famalawan maila tatafan mumo tatafan gera tatafan matay pudi tanota munga man maarnyo Pino Inglaterra, I will die for my island. I will die for my people. At least I die free. E qua lei lo dispensa che ne tagliano sa todo tempo na mamme più sti para putano awahasuzu landing fee and in fair market value gi runway gai gizo gi runway 14 acres pa familya ko 7 manelon man tatao ita masamko Masya landing fee kada tumuno ketu airport mangana estimated gi 2019 $500 million a year. 72 años malofan 72 years malofan. Jasiga mangana million. Esta jo bidzon na salapi. Dahil sa tisina mamanayam ni parking. Lo sina manafan park iman senador i gobyerno gi manafan park di baddi. Lo hita Hajitu gaezu na taonu ji mana kikela guazonya gua batkurai nenya guazonya bisnis batkunairi o mis giza ha ar kikela mesmo gitanonya. Ai mamalaw no za ipu itau sia ni man matatatsun gwihi ti mahahasu no dala da tada conscientian mizu para man tau mo have the conscience of your people they Mane luhu mane na dispensa sa peswa hasu talu tutugi papa ta na pamuta DHL Customs and Quarantine Social Security Administration FSA NRCS ta na pamanapasi no siya back pay 72 cuántos años está ocupación está lo malik sa edukasyon esti Senator Dueñas Jesus maase Todo samzulay. Todo sam speaker. Senator Paris. The magagigam just estambi. Mala de jatafandanya kumuhita manatibo, the native people, hombre. Basta ni manauto sa nizong. We are endangered species, esta. Manokukit. Esta umbisi finono ta ha. Mamatay. Ukekenalala ni famagonwa. Lokidza ni famagun niya. Man matayit maneluhu. Masempune lokin ni spitat ko muti tatawat sa. Susti waddi. Gracias a Dios, pwede tima disatendio, ang ipamanayo ni accident na manasua. Ay, ihati na enfermera ni muskwela pago kumunuhungo kesti, munga kes lagwat na. Sotazu lam na sa gida ju tubatsu para mantauta. Lo, maila na jata fanasu, yere if you are hungo kesti, let's think out of the box. Afan na paratay. Senator Terlaje lay at tananay Governor Terlaje para ko. Sige nay malago. Tunga pa. Mala de besangan. Abogado how? Atungo. He's a lawyer. Ini gitu ni tuhon niya. Dala jati atungo todos ti. Isti siya man abogado man sen malati. Ombis gua ke tai esti. Da eklo todo no bisi matao ti man liliu sta ti go flati. Mampus megge. Mala jata na simplicio. Jata noya toti jasia lamun. Hafa man lagu niya ni tano niya. Jadi masya noin no na onimu na dinisea sa ihaga imanay na niya. Malalagnus gita siya. Kung ukena na palabras. Za gwalo ko representa man familia ko na hagagasa zo na taono magwalului kunehu tidzan. Mataya una tetenan na si Tiyo si Gregorio lagwat niya. Pwede hali manana na o fanyagi. Lo enigi angin para mapasyam nesti pes maulik lo mentras timan ma cuculi tanunia mentras timan ma cuculi tanunia na ifan tatti ade manelu manainahu hamzu ni mama tatatsung genau gitrono ni manggai pudet put fabot enigi sa Pagod na momento ahasu babe na fanotsi manuk man sta popegi. Mo lalon su loki sos pipia na ili na lao gumagwalu. Pagod man nyalang manuk man matay. Susti gwadi. Mala jata na fakpua jon tugya legislation. Jata pasas ti za munga. Na ida fanana jata fanalo guneksa basta jata fanena. Okuka pas esta si Jesus masi manilu manamdo todo lo ki genagi publiko ni mane ekungok manata tsuham para hamzu enna gi isti tano manay nata i komisyon i manay nata si Jesus masi.
Si Jesus masi. Mr. Leonger, Ken.
For the record, my name is Ken Leon Guerrero. I'm a community advocate, have been for the past 15 years. I've been dancing with Guam Memorial Hospital since 2010 as a community advocate. I've been deeply involved in this situation since January of this year. So over the past 10 months, I've issued quite a number of FOIAs. I've initiated 3 legal actions against the governor of Guam, against the head of the Guam Memorial Hospital, and against the Guam Police Department to force compliance with these FOIAs. I've received hundreds, maybe 1,000 pages of documents on this very matter, and I've even been arrested in the process of trying to get access to the type of information that I'm putting together for you in my presentation today. because one thing that will become clear in my presentation is the governor of Guam is lying to you and lying to the people of Guam and putting the financial future of our children and grandchildren at jeopardy. And in this presentation, I will walk through and show you the difference between fact and fiction as it comes out of Adelup. Could we start with my PowerPoint, please?
Is the PowerPoint ready? Okay, after this, we have David Lotz, who's online, Maria Hernandez, David Underwood, Antonio Sablan, and Thomas Bernardo.
Well, this is going to be interesting. Okay, the people of Guam have every reason to be concerned about the construction of a new hospital because, number one, not everybody here on Guam can fly to Manila or Los Angeles. So the public hospital is the public healthcare lifeboat. That's why we, the people of Guam, need to be concerned about that. We also need to be concerned about the cost. Next slide.
My apologies. I'm being told we have to recess to reset the audio. My apologies. So we'll just stop right there.
Okay.
If we could reset that as quick as possible, please.